Chapter 291. If what Zhou Jing said was true, there was still a slight possibility that the head of the Secretariat would use this opportunity to suppress the old faction of the royal family. Then the head of the Secretariat would completely eliminate this small possibility. The head of the Secretariat was the head of all the officials, and the head of the Secretariat was only second to the head of the Secretariat. Furthermore, he had no enmity with Cui Ming. How could the two of them deceive the Empress and the officials at the same time? The Assistant Minister of Personnel, who was speaking up for Cui Ming, immediately turned pale and sweated profusely. He knelt on the ground and said loudly, "Your Majesty, I swear to the heavens that I was also deceived by Cui Ming. I didn't know that he was colluding with the demon sect." At this moment, no one in the imperial court cared about the Assistant Minister of Personnel. The imperial court would investigate whether or not he knew, or whether or not he was a spy for the demon sect. Not only him, but anyone close to Cui Ming would be thoroughly investigated. The demon sect was notorious. They harmed the people and tried to overthrow the imperial court. No country would tolerate the demon sect. The governor of Zhejiang was a high-ranking official in the imperial court. However, because of the crime of colluding with the demon sect, his family of more than 100 people was killed. Even his soul didn't survive. Cui Ming's case involved the demon sect. It was a serious matter. Colluding with the demon sect was equivalent to treason. The Empress immediately ordered the Ministry of Justice and the Supreme Court to take control of the people in Princess Yunyang's residence. Anyone close to Cui Ming, whether they were officials in the imperial court or nobles in Luoyang, would be strictly interrogated without exception. After the imperial court was dismissed, the officials left with solemn expressions. After Li Mu walked out of the main hall, he didn't leave the palace. Instead, he went to Xiangyang Palace. Before the imperial court was dismissed, he received a message from Shengguan Li. The Empress wanted to see him. Li Mu returned to the North County with a mission. He needed to meet the Empress to report on his work. After arriving at Xiangyang Palace, he told the Empress everything that had happened, including the assassination attempt by Phantom Princess, how they caught her and let her escape. The Ministry of Justice and the Supreme Court acted quickly. As soon as Li Mu finished speaking, the Minister of Justice and the Minister of the Supreme Court asked for an audience outside Xiangyang Palace. After the Empress issued the summons, the Minister of Justice and the Minister of the Supreme Court walked into the main hall. The Minister of Justice had a solemn expression as he said, "Your Majesty, a day ago, Cui Ming and Princess Yunyang went to the Divine Dragon Court to play and have yet to return. Your subject and the Minister of the Supreme Court went to the Divine Dragon Court and discovered that only Princess Yunyang was unconscious in her room. Cui Ming's whereabouts were unknown." Hearing this, Shengguan Li's expression changed slightly. She said, "Impossible. The internal guards have been watching Cui Ming. He has never left the Divine Dragon Court." Li Mu wasn't surprised. With Cui Ming's cultivation, there were countless ways for him to leave quietly. Obviously, the speed at which Cui Ming received the news was much faster than the speed at which Li Mu traveled. It was very likely that he and the demon sect were communicating with each other through some kind of magical item or secret technique. The Empress closed her eyes and pinched her fingers. After a while, she slowly opened her eyes and said sternly, "He went to the north. Send an order to the 36 counties. Princess Yunyang's husband, Cui Ming, colluded with the demon sect and framed an official of the imperial court. Once discovered, he is to be arrested immediately, dead or alive." "Yes, Your Majesty." Li Mu immediately realized how important instant communication was. He looked at the Empress and asked, "Your Majesty, is there any magical item that can instantly transmit messages from 1,000 miles away? If I had such a magical item, I wouldn't have given Cui Ming the chance to escape." The Empress thought for a while and stretched out her hand. An item appeared in her palm. It was a white item that looked like a conch shell. The conch shell slowly floated in front of Li Mu and he held it in his hand. The Empress said, "If there is an emergency, use your magic to activate this conch shell and speak to it. I will then be able to hear your voice." Li Mu happily accepted the treasure and asked again, "Your Majesty, is there any item that can instantly send someone 1,000 miles away?" Can you give me one? If it wasn't for this treasure, Huan Ji wouldn't have been able to escape from me. Hearing this, the Minister of Justice and the Minister of Justice looked at Li Mu a few more times. The Empress glanced at him and said, the teleportation talisman requires a powerhouse above the transcendence level. It takes a lot of time and effort to make it. I don't have one either. Li Mu felt that it was a pity. He thought for a while and said, Your Majesty, do you have any more fate pills? I used the one you gave me last time. No more. The Empress waved her sleeve and Li Mu was violently swept out of the door. She didn't need to chase him away so violently. Li Mu tidied his clothes and slowly walked out of the palace. Cui Ming had escaped, but he couldn't escape forever. His actions had crossed the bottom line of the imperial court. Even if he ran to the ends of the earth, he couldn't escape the imperial court's pursuit. He had lived in the divine capital for more than a decade and left behind countless traces. It wasn't difficult to calculate his location through the things he left behind. After returning home, Li Mu released the 2 female ghosts. Su He was still asleep and he didn't know when she would wake up. He let them accompany Xiao Bai at home and do chores like cleaning the house. Raising 2 obedient ghosts at home was much easier than hiring maids and servants. Li Mu didn't stay at home for long. He walked out of the door and headed to the Ministry of Justice. When he left the palace, he received a message from the Empress telling him to go to the Ministry of Justice and investigate the case of the Jianghu County chief. It had been confirmed that Cui Ming was a spy from the demon sect. From the tree demon's memories, he also learned that the tragedy in Jianghu County was framed by Cui Ming and the demon sect. The so-called investigation was just to urge the Ministry of Justice to reverse the verdict for the Jianghu County chief. On the way to the Ministry of Justice, Li Mu's heart was heavy. Even if he reversed the verdict for the Jianghu County chief, it would be useless. The Jianghu County chief's entire family and more than 100 lives had been lost more than a decade ago. Even if the imperial court cleared their names today, they wouldn't be able to see it. Princess Yunyang's son-in-law was a member of the demon sect. This time, the entire Xiao clan and its old clique would probably be in a panic. Most of the people in the divine capital were shocked that Cui Ming was a spy from the demon sect and gossiped about the Xiao royal family scandal. However, very few people talked about the Jianghu County chief and his family, who had died unjustly. Li Mu arrived at the Ministry of Justice and explained his intentions to the Ministry of Justice's director. The imperial court had already concluded that the Jianghu County chief and his family had died unjustly. Li Mu was also acting under the Empress's orders, so the Ministry of Justice naturally didn't dare to be negligent. They mobilized all the officials to search for the case files of the Jianghu County chief from more than a decade ago. These files would be overturned and rewritten. The Jianghu County chief's injustice would also be cleared. Although this had nothing to do with him anymore, because colluding with the demon sect was a crime that could implicate 9 generations of his family and descendants had also died in the incident more than a decade ago. The director of the Ministry of Justice destroyed the old fake files one by one and sighed. After more than a decade, the Jianghu County chief has finally received justice. Zhou Zhong placed his hands behind his back and said indifferently, "Justice that comes late isn't justice." From the day he died, he would never receive justice. After saying this, he didn't speak again. The director of the Ministry of Justice thought about his words. He felt that the atmosphere was particularly heavy when the assistant minister and Li Mu didn't say anything. He took the initiative to change the topic. "Sir, a deputy county chief from Tianhe County of Hanyang County died in his home under mysterious circumstances a few days ago. The way he died was similar to the way the county chief from Ani County of Danyang County died. It seems like it was done by the same person. Although the 2 counties are thousands of miles apart and the 2 cases seem to be unrelated. However, after investigating, I found that the county chief from Ani County and the deputy county chief from Tianhe County were both officials in the Ministry of Personnel more than a decade ago." Zhou Zhong said calmly, "Send the files of this case to my office. I will send people to investigate. You don't have to worry about it." The director of the Ministry of Justice nodded. "I will go get it now." Li Mu stood in the Ministry of Justice and looked at the offices where the files were kept. He said, I wonder how many more cases there are. Zhou Zhong said faintly, each of these scrolls represents a few souls of the deceased. Perhaps some of them were wronged, but not all of them are as lucky as the Zhejiang County chief. Their injustice will last for thousands of years until the end of the world. How could Li Mu not know what Zhou Zhong said? There were so many cases of injustice. Very few of them could be redressed. Most of them would be buried in the river of history until the end of the world. It was the same in ancient times. After a while, Li Mu left the Ministry of Justice and Zhou Zhong walked back to the office. He glanced at one of the scrolls on the table. The scroll floated up, and a ball of fire suddenly appeared and engulfed the scroll. Soon, there was nothing left in the void. Not even ashes were left. Late at night, Li Mu lay on the bed, tossing and turning, unable to fall asleep. With more than 100 lives lost, the imperial court only needed to say that this was an unjust case caused by the demonic sect, and they could easily brush it aside. It was as if nothing had happened more than 10 years ago. This made him feel somewhat stifled and flustered. After a while, he took out the conch. After activating it with his mana, he asked softly, Your Majesty, are you asleep? Tranquil Palace. It was already past midnight. Zhou Yi lay on the bed, but she did not feel sleepy at all. To her, this palace was no different from a cage. This cage isolated her from family, friendship, love, and any other human emotions. Even during the day, when people came and went in the palace and officials filled the crepe myrtle shop, she often felt lonely. Every night, this loneliness would be infinitely magnified. There was no sound around her. It was as if there was only dead silence in the entire world apart from her. At a certain moment, a voice suddenly sounded in this dead silence. Your Majesty, are you asleep? His voice wasn't loud, but it brought endless vitality to this deathly silent world. Zhou Yi cleared her throat and made her voice dignified. She asked, What is it? Li Mu did not expect the Empress to still be awake. He slowly said, I think that the imperial court should announce the injustice the Zhejiang prefectural governor suffered to the world. This is the only way to clear his name. Zhou Yi thought for a moment and said, Tomorrow, I will issue an edict and order the Ministry of Works to erect a monument and a temple in Zhejiang prefectural governor's memory for future generations. The Empress thought more than he thought. Li Mu sighed. Your Majesty is wise. Zhou Yi asked, Is there anything else? Li Mu thought for a moment and said, Your Majesty, do you have many conches that can transmit messages? Your Majesty, my fiancé is in the northern prefectural, thousands of miles away from me. It is inconvenient for us to meet. I want to give her one. Chapter 292. After obtaining this magical conch, Li Mu suddenly had an idea. If he could give one to Lu Hanyan, then even if the two of them were thousands of miles apart, one in Beijing and the other in Chengdu, they would still be able to talk to each other in real time. Making conch porridge every night was something that he could look forward to. Instead of calling this conch a magical item, it was more like a phone that could only talk to one person. In Tranquil Palace, Zhou Yi said calmly, No. Li Mu was a little disappointed, but he was prepared. After all, if he had 3 of these things, wouldn't the Empress be eavesdropping on him and Lu Hanyan when they were being sweet? This would be too much of a shock to her. After all, she was almost 30 years old and was still single. It was inevitable that she would be envious when she saw other couples. He couldn't let her see other people in love. Should he ask for her conch and give it to Lu Hanyan? This bold idea only flashed through Li Mu's mind for a moment before he extinguished it. With the Empress's breadth of mind, she wouldn't give Li Mu a conch. She would only give him a whip. I'm sorry for being presumptuous. Good night, Your Majesty. I'll hang up first. Announcing to the world that the Zhejiang prefectural governor was innocent had already been reported to the Empress. Li Mu was about to put down the conch when the Empress's voice came again. Tell me about you and your fiancé. Li Mu was stunned. He didn't expect the Empress to be so nosy. It wasn't a big deal to talk about his experience with Lu Hanyan, but it seemed a little cruel to tell an old single dog about it. This was no longer abusing a single dog, but killing a dog. However, this was the Empress's own request, and she didn't give Li Mu a choice. Li Mu thought for a moment and said, "That was almost a year ago. At that time, I was still a constable in Yangqiu County. She had just moved to Yangqiu County and lived next door to me." As Li Mu narrated the story to the Empress, he also recalled the process of how he and Lu Hanyan met, got to know each other, and fell in love with each other. In his 2 lifetimes, he had only been in a serious relationship. From the beginning, the 2 of them were hostile to each other. Later on, they were inseparable. Who knew how many twists and turns they had gone through in the process? Li Mu added, "In less than a year, she will come to the capital and we will get married there. If you have time at that time, you can come to my home for the wedding banquet. My wife admires you a lot and won't let me say anything bad about you." The Empress asked calmly, "Did you speak ill of me?" Li Mu hurriedly explained, "What I mean is that she is very protective of your Majesty, just like how I am protective of your Majesty." The Empress was silent for a moment and asked, "You? Why are you protecting me?" Li Mu thought for a moment and said, "Because in my heart, your Majesty is a wise ruler worthy of my protection. The reason why I am fearless in the capital is because I know that your Majesty is behind me. Your Majesty is my strongest support. I am willing to be the sharp spear in your Majesty's hand." The Empress didn't speak. After a long time, she said, "How is your learning of magic?" Li Mu said honestly, "During this time, I have been busy with Cui Ming. Under your Majesty's guidance, I only learned how to be invisible." The Empress said, "Although you have Fulu and magic treasures, these are all external objects. You need to learn more magic as soon as possible to improve your strength." Li Mu also understood what the Empress said. Cultivators could rely on Fulu and magic treasures, but relying on oneself was better than relying on anything else. With the water-repellent talisman, one could also move in water. However, if one learned the magic to enter water, one could go to any river, lake, or sea. The fire-sitting technique could allow one to enter fire without burning, and there was no need to use Fulu magic treasures. Other than that, there were other magic that were very practical. For example, the clothing blocking technique could prevent fire, rain, and dust from touching one's body. The Qi restriction technique could push one's physical body to the extreme, comparable to the golden body of Buddhism. There was no sound from the conch, but Li Mu felt sleepy and quickly fell asleep. In the dream, the Empress wore an ordinary white dress and said, "From today onwards, I will teach you magic in your dream. Learn seriously." Sure enough, flattery was useful. Having a transcendent tier elite teach them step by step was an opportunity that many people could only dream of. As long as Li Mu stood firmly on the Empress's side, he would be able to see creation tier elites waving at him. No matter how high one's cultivation talent was, it was very difficult to reach the creation realm before the age of 30 without a great opportunity. However, with the guidance of a transcendent realm master, enough spiritual jades, and enough psychokinesis, it was not impossible to complete the path that others would take decades to complete in a few years. Shangguanli was an example. Speaking of Shangguanli, she was the Empress's personal maid and also the Empress's mouthpiece in the imperial court. This time, she did not appear in the morning court. Cui Ming escaped from under the eyes of the inner guards, which made her very angry because the people who were watching Cui Ming were her subordinates. In order to save face, she specially asked the Empress to personally lead people to hunt down Cui Ming. The task of passing the imperial court's decree fell on Li Mu's head. Li Mu walked from the corner to the high platform in front of the Empress and replaced Shangguanli's position. In the past, Li Mu could only secretly observe from the corner of the hall because of the Empress. Now, he stood in front of the hall and looked down at the officials. The matter of Cui Ming being a spy from the demon sect was of great importance and involved many people. Today's morning court only discussed this matter. The servants of the prince consort's residence were all arrested by the imperial court. After a soul search, a few more disciples of the demon sect were found. Cui Ming's identity was confirmed. The current prince consort, a fourth-rank official of the country, was actually a spy from the demon sect. This was a disgrace to the imperial court and the greatest insult to the imperial court. What's more, Cui Ming was the assistant minister of the secretariat of the Great Zhou. He was in a high position and knew almost all of the national affairs. All of the decisions of the Great Zhou were made through the secretariat of the secretariat. To some extent, in the past few years, the demon sect had controlled the imperial court of the Great Zhou. In the past few years, Cui Ming's actions were to control the old party and firmly support the payment of guilt. In the handling of certain matters, it seemed that he was protecting the old party and protecting the interests of the influential officials. In fact, he was consuming the people's confidence in the Great Zhou and weakening the people's mental power. He was taking advantage of this to cause chaos in the imperial court. The old party suffered a great blow in the matter of Cui Ming. The officials and influential officials who were in close contact with Cui Ming were all interrogated with the soul manipulation technique. Even Princess Yunyang was not spared. Fortunately, they were not found to have colluded with the demon sect. Otherwise, if the Zhou family and the new party seized the opportunity, the crime of colluding with the demon sect would be enough to consign the Shao family to eternal damnation. Of course, even so, some of the officials of the new party took advantage of this to impeach the old party members in the imperial court. Usually, the two parties argued until their faces turned red and they wanted to fight. This time, the officials of the old party could only endure silently. In the matter of Cui Ming, they only thought of their own interests. None of the officials in the imperial court mentioned the Zhejiang prefectural governor. Li Mu looked at the magistrate and said, "His Majesty has decreed that the Zhejiang prefectural governor has been framed by Cui Ming and has been wronged to this day. It is to be announced to the world that he is innocent. In addition, the Ministry of Works is to send people to Zhejiang prefectural governor to build a temple and erect a monument for him. The Ministry of Justice, Supreme Court, and Zongjing Temple should take this case as a warning." Cui Ming's case was a wake-up call for the imperial court. The demon sect's hands had already reached into the imperial court. More than 10 years ago, they had planted spies in the imperial court and even became the emperor's son-in-law. If Cui Ming's old crimes had not been exposed, no one knew how long he would have hidden and how many state secrets he had leaked to the demon sect. No one knew if there were other spies of the demon sect in the imperial court other than Cui Ming. The internal guards were already investigating the officials in the imperial court. After the court, Zhang Chun and Li Mu walked side by side and asked, "If you can't search the officials' souls, how can you investigate the spies of the demon sect?" Li Mu said, "The spies of the demon sect all have one thing in common. No matter if they are male or female, they are all very handsome. Such people are the easiest to gain the trust of others and obtain information." Zhang Chun breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Then they shouldn't suspect me." After saying that, he seemed to have realized something. His expression became a little complicated. For a moment, he didn't know whether to be happy or sad. Chapter 293. Zhang Chun sighed as he stood at the entrance of the palace. Although Cui Ming had been removed from his post and became a wanted criminal, it seemed like he had won against Cui Ming. However, in another aspect, he was still inferior to Cui Ming. What a superficial world this was. They categorized people based on their looks. People who looked like Cui Ming and Li Mu were liked and pursued by countless women. These good-looking people, whether it was their life or their career, would be smoother than most people. Even the devil's sex spies required them to be good-looking. As for people with ordinary looks like them, they often had to put in several times more effort to obtain things that were easily within their reach. He shook his head and sighed, "How shallow. It's fine if the women in divine capital are shallow, but I didn't expect the demon sect to be so shallow as well. The more handsome a person is, the more they will be suspected. Won't I be in danger then?" A voice from behind interrupted Zhang Chun's sigh. He turned around and saw Prince Shou standing not far behind him and Li Mu with a worried look. Zhang Chun's gaze lingered on Prince Shou's bulging belly for a while before he said, "Your Highness, you're worrying too much. No one in the imperial court is safer than you." Prince Shou patted his chest and said, that's good, that's good." After that, he seemed to have realized something. He pointed at Zhang Chun and said angrily, Zhang, what do you mean by that? Are you saying that I'm not handsome? You're just a deputy of the Imperial Clan Temple. How dare you offend me? I didn't mean that. I think that's what you meant. Why don't you take a piss and look at yourself? What right do you have to talk about me? Let me tell you, when I was young, I was also a famous handsome man in Divine Capital. Prince Shou cursed as he got into the sedan. Zhang Chun returned to the Divine Capital Yamen. Li Mu bought some groceries on the way home. He had just returned from a business trip and planned to give himself a few days off. When he reached the door, he saw a figure standing there. Madame Chu stood there and looked at Li Mu. "Milord, you've returned." Li Mu looked at her and said, "Cui Ming is a spy from the demon sect. The imperial court has put him on the wanted list in all 36 counties. He can't escape. You just have to wait for the news in the capital." Madame Chu shook her head and said, "I'm here to bid you farewell. Cui Ming and I have an irreconcilable grudge. I want to kill this bastard with my own hands." Li Mu thought about it and did not try to persuade her again. For the past 20 years, she had lived solely on hatred. Her only goal was to kill Cui Ming with her own hands. This was the knot in her heart and her obsession. If she couldn't end Cui Ming with her own hands and resolve this obsession, it would be very difficult for her to make any progress in her cultivation. The gap between the 5th realm and the 6th realm was the biggest gap in the first 6 realms. As long as a cultivator could break through to the supernatural realm, it was only a matter of time for them to reach the creation realm. Those who were less talented would be able to reach the creation realm after a few decades. However, reaching the 6th realm from the 5th realm was not just a matter of time. There were many creation realm experts in the imperial court. The 36 officials were all in the creation realm. However, there were only a few experts in Dongxian. If Madame Chu could not let go of the knot in her heart, she would be stuck at the 5th realm for the rest of her life. Li Mu looked at her and said, "You have to be careful. Cui Ming has escaped from the divine capital. I'm afraid there will be experts from the demon sect around him. You'd better meet up with the experts from the imperial court and act together." Madame Chu nodded and said, "I understand." After she finished speaking, she slowly knelt on the ground and said, "Thank you for taking me in and helping me, sir. After I kill Cui Ming with my own hands, if I'm still alive, I'm willing to serve you as my master and be your servant." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "There's no need for that. For the past 20 years, you've been living for hatred. I hope that after you kill your enemy, you can live for yourself." Madame Chu was a pitiful person. She had met a bad man who caused her own death and her entire family to be killed. However, compared to the daughter of the Zhejiang County chief, she was considered lucky because she had the chance to kill her enemy. The first half of her life was already unfortunate enough. Li Mu felt uneasy about taking her in as a servant. Madame Chu kowtowed 3 times to Li Mu and turned to leave. The space around Li Mu was filled with her feelings of gratitude. Ever since he condensed the 7 spirits, he rarely cultivated by absorbing emotions. Compared to spiritual jades and psyche power, the way to produce the 7 emotions was very troublesome. However, Li Mu did not waste the emotions left by Madame Chu. On the path of cultivation, the easier it was to obtain a power, the harder it was to cultivate. For example, the spiritual power of heaven and earth was contained in various places. As long as one knew how to guide it, they could refine it for cultivation. However, this method of cultivation was very slow and it was very difficult to increase one's level. As for special powers like the 7 emotions and psyche power, although they were very difficult to obtain, they could greatly increase one's cultivation speed. Li Mu's cultivation speed was so fast not because he had a pure yang body, but because the people of the divine capital were using psyche power to support his cultivation. Of course, the most important reason was that he had met the Empress. If the Empress had not given him enlightenment when he was at a bottleneck, Li Mu would probably still be stuck at the concentrating spirit realm. Not only did she help Li Mu break through to the next level, but in the past few nights, she had also used the dream entry technique to teach Li Mu divine abilities in his dreams. Under her guidance, Li Mu made rapid progress. In just 3 days, he had mastered 2 divine abilities. Other than that, Li Mu would also play chess with her in his dreams and chat with her. Of course, most of the time, he was asking the Empress questions about his cultivation. After watching Madame Chu leave, Li Mu returned home and cooked dinner. After hesitating for a while, he took out the conch and activated it with his spiritual power. "Your Majesty, have you eaten?" There was no response from the conch for a long time. Just as Li Mu was about to put it away, the space in the courtyard rippled and the Empress appeared out of thin air. Li Mu was very envious of her ability to transform into a living person. However, the teleportation technique required one to be at the peak of Dongxian. He still had a long way to go. When he was in the North region, he used the nature pill to save Su He. Li Mu planned to care more for the Empress when he returned to the divine capital. She was actually just an ordinary woman trapped in a cage. This had nothing to do with her identity as an Empress, nor did it have anything to do with her transcendent strength. What she needed the most was not power or strength, but family and friends. Li Mu could not be her family. He could only try his best to be her friend. Moreover, with the healing element Xiao Bai around, she should be able to experience some feelings that the Empress could not in the palace. After the meal, the Empress gave Xiao Bai some pointers on her cultivation. Before she left, she suddenly looked at Xiao Bai and asked, "Do you want to go to the palace with me to play?" Xiao Bai was a little tempted. However, she first looked at Li Mu. Li Mu nodded and said, "If you want to go, you can go with Sister Zhou." As a single dog, she did not sleep in the middle of the night and made conch porridge with Li Mu just to listen to his love story with Lu Hanyan. It was enough to see how lonely the Empress was. Xiao Bai was naturally adorable. If she stayed by the Empress's side, she could relieve some of her loneliness. Different from Shangguan Li and Mr. Mei, in Xiao Bai's heart, there was no Empress of the Great Zhou. There was only Sister Zhou who treated her very well and gave her the essence of the celestial fox. The Empress did not lack people who respected her. What she lacked were people who were not afraid of her identity as the Empress and treated her as an equal. Since ancient times, it had been lonely at the top. Whether it was the peak of strength or the peak of status, once one climbed to the top, it was easy to become lonely. Xiao Bai had been longing for the beautiful scenery of the imperial garden for a long time. After seeing Li Mu agree, she happily held the Empress's hand and said, "Okay, okay." The 2 figures disappeared in front of Li Mu again. Li Mu walked to the courtyard and began to practice his new supernatural power. After a while, in the imperial garden, Zhou Yi looked at Xiao Bai and asked, "Xiao Bai, how did you meet Li Mu?" Speaking of this, a brilliant smile appeared on Xiao Bai's face as she said, "Before I could transform, I accidentally fell into a hunter's trap. It was Benefactor who saved me and even bandaged my wounds. From then on, I swore to repay Benefactor." Zhou Yi asked curiously, "How?" Xiao Bai blushed slightly and said, "I want to marry Benefactor and stay by his side for the rest of my life." Zhou Yi was slightly stunned and asked, "Doesn't he already have a fiancé?" Xiao Bai said, "Benefactor has Sister Lu and Sister Wanwan, but he can also have me. The 3 of us will accompany Benefactor for the rest of our lives." Zhou Qiong had already forgotten a certain matter, but Xiao Bai's words caused her to involuntarily recall the absurd scene she had seen in Li Mumu's dream that night. This caused her, who had never experienced something like this before, to feel an indescribable panic in her heart. She even felt a deep sense of fear. Then, she was suddenly shocked. On the path of cultivation, this was not the first time she had felt this. This was an inner demon. As her cultivation increased, the inner demon would also become stronger. Once an inner demon was born, the consequences would be unimaginable. She wanted to suppress this palpitating heart, but the more she tried not to think about it, the clearer the image in her mind became. With great difficulty, she finally suppressed this palpitating heart with supreme determination. In her heart, she was already extremely regretful. She had transformed into the woman in his dream and played with him in every possible way, causing Li Mu to mistakenly think that an inner demon had appeared. Now, she had finally received her retribution. Moreover, she could not blame Li Mu for this at all. Because she had invaded Li Mu's dream without his consent, she could only blame herself. Xiao Bai was playing in the imperial garden, while Zhou Yi returned to her bedroom and sat cross-legged on the bed. The matter of an inner demon could not be underestimated. If it was ignored, the cultivation would stagnate at best, and the cultivation would regress at worst, or even suffer from qi deviation. Her inner demon had arisen because of Li Mu. The simplest and fastest way was naturally to kill Li Mu, and the inner demon would naturally be eliminated. But she could not and would not do so. How could she bear to kill the most understanding and supportive of her? For her sake, he did not hesitate to offend all the court officials, the old and new parties, and her most capable and closest subjects in the 3 academies. Zhou Yi took a deep breath, slowly closed her eyes, and began to think of other ways to eliminate the inner demon. Chapter 294. Late at night. Li Mu laid on the bed in a comfortable position, waiting for the Empress to arrive. Perhaps it was because she had broken Li Mu's wet dream the last time, but these days, the Empress had never entered his dreams without saying a word. Instead, she would take the initiative to hypnotize Li Mu, and then appear. However, tonight, Li Mu waited for a long time, but the Empress didn't appear. He opened his eyes and took out the conch. After inserting his mana, he asked softly, "Your Majesty, are you not coming tonight?" No sound came from the conch. Li Mu waited for a while before putting it away. Although he didn't know what the Empress was busy with, it was obvious that she wouldn't be coming tonight. Li Mu didn't wait any longer and quickly entered the dream. Tranquil Palace, Zhou Yi lay on the bed, tossing and turning. As soon as she closed her eyes, the scene would appear in front of her. After a while, she got up from the bed and sat cross-legged. She forced herself to enter an ethereal state. The moon was bright and the stars were sparse. Li Mu stood in the courtyard and looked up at the full moon in the sky, deep in thought. For a few days, the Empress didn't appear in his dreams. Although she didn't appear often before, her identity wasn't exposed at that time. A few days ago, she entered Li Mu's dreams every day to teach him spells. Not only that, during the morning court session today, the seat that should have been his was replaced by Lady Mei. She said that it was the Empress's arrangement. Li Mu couldn't help but wonder if he had offended the Empress in some way, or if he had angered her. After thinking carefully, Li Mu ruled out this possibility. After returning from the North County, he treated the Empress even better than before. He was worried that she would be lonely, so he took the initiative to chat with her at night, talking about life and dreams. He was worried that she would be tired of eating delicacies, so he personally cooked her favorite dishes and sent his Xiao Bai to the palace to accompany her. The Empress had no reason to be angry with him. That night, Li Mu thought about it all night, but he still couldn't figure out the reason. The next morning, he prepared to enter the palace to sound out the Empress. At the entrance of Tranquil Palace, Mr. Mei walked out of the palace and said, "His Majesty is not in the palace. If there's anything, you can tell me." According to what Li Mu knew, the Empress rarely left the palace. She could no longer return to the Zhou family. Every time she left the palace, she would go to the Li residence. Mr. Mei was obviously lying, and she had no reason to lie to Li Mu. This had to be the Empress's idea. This meant that the events that had occurred in the past few days were not because Li Mu had thought too much, but rather because the Empress had deliberately done so. Li Mu didn't show any strange expression on his face. He asked, "It's not a big deal. I just want to ask if Cui Ming has been caught." Mr. Mei shook his head and said, "Not yet, but Ali has gone after him personally. She has many masters around her, and she can track Cui Ming all the way. He can't escape." "That's good." Li Mu nodded and said, "Then I'll go back first. Goodbye, Sister Mei." Mr. Mei watched him leave, thought for a moment, and said, "Wait." Li Mu turned around and asked, "Is there anything else?" Mr. Mei asked, "Did you make His Majesty angry again?" Li Mu shook his head. Recently, not only did he not speak ill of her behind her back, but he was even nicer to her. He couldn't figure out why the Empress had suddenly become cold to him. Mr. Mei said helplessly, then you go back first. I'll let you know if there's any news about Cui Ming. Li Mu nodded and turned to leave again. Mr. Mei walked into the Tranquil palace and looked at the empress who was dealing with the memorials. His lips moved as if he had something to ask, but he didn't say anything in the end. Zhou Yi closed a memorial and looked out of the palace. A trace of helplessness appeared in the depths of her eyes. The inner demon of the transcendent realm was no small matter. It took her a lot of effort to suppress it. If she saw Li Mu, she was afraid that all her efforts would be in vain. Outside the Tranquil palace, a maid on duty glanced at the Tranquil palace and hurried away. A moment later, in the Fusho palace of the West Palace, the Empress Dowager looked at a maid kneeling in the palace and asked, "Is what you said true? That Li Mu went to the palace to see Her Majesty, but Her Majesty didn't see him?" The maid nodded and said, "It's true. Commander Mei told Li Mu that Her Majesty wasn't in the palace. But I saw with my own eyes that Her Majesty entered the Tranquil palace 15 minutes ago and didn't come out after that. She must have deliberately not seen him." The Empress Dowager said suspiciously, "Li Mu is her favorite. Why didn't she see him?" The maid said, "Not only did Her Majesty not see him this time, but during the morning court, he was supposed to take over Commander Shengguan's position. But today, he was replaced by Commander Mei. I guess that Li Mu has fallen out of favor." Fallen out of favor? A cold smile gradually appeared on the Empress Dowager's face. She said sarcastically, "He deserves it. Because of him, I lost the only death exemption token bestowed by the late emperor. I haven't settled this debt with him yet. What will happen to a dog that has lost its master?" A maid beside her said, "Empress Dowager, even the academy can't defeat Li Mu. You must be careful." The Empress Dowager twitched her mouth and said, "He has offended so many people in the Luoyang. There are so many people who want him dead. I don't need to do it myself. As long as I spread the news that he has fallen out of favor, someone will do it for me." After leaving the palace, Li Mu didn't go home. Instead, he went to an inn. He carried a jar of wine and knocked on a door on the second floor of the inn. Li Si was holding a book in his hand. He was swaying his head as he read. When he opened the door and saw Li Mu, he asked in confusion, "Why are you here?" These days, Li Si was preparing for the imperial examination. He had been studying hard in the inn. Li Mu had only seen him a few times. Li Mu put the jar of wine on the table and said, "I have a question to ask you." Li Si waved his hand. He stared at the book and said, "Wait. Let me finish this part first." Li Mu took the book from his hand and said, "You don't have to memorize it. This part won't be tested." Li Si glanced at him and said, "How do you know it won't be tested? Are you the one who set the questions?" Although the questions weren't set by Li Mu, the official who set the questions had to set the questions according to the outlines set by Li Mu. Li Mu returned the book to Li Si and said, "Believe it or not." Li Si looked at Li Mu and threw the book away decisively. He said, "Remember to tell me what the questions are a few days in advance." Li Mu said, "There aren't any questions. I can highlight the key points for you. In the end, you still have to rely on yourself." "Enough, enough." Li Si sat down and opened the jar of wine. He poured a bowl of wine for him and Li Mu. He said, "Tell me, what's the problem?" Li Mu said slowly, "I have a friend who has encountered some problems recently." Li Si glanced at him and asked, "Do I know this friend of yours?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "You don't know the friends I have in Luoyang." He continued, "This friend of mine has a friend of the opposite sex. A few days ago, this friend of the opposite sex was very good to him. From time to time, he would give him expensive gifts and treat him to meals. The two of them would talk about life and dreams together. But recently, this friend of the opposite sex suddenly became cold to my friend. He didn't even want to see him." "Why is that?" Li Si asked, "Did you offend her?" "Not me. It's my friend." "Did your friend offend her?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "No. Not only did he not offend her, he was very good to her. I don't know why she suddenly became like this." Li Si took a sip of wine and touched his chin. He said, there are 3 possibilities. First, you are her target, but only one of them. She is cold to you because she has someone else she is passionate about. Li Mu shook his head. The Empress was not the kind of person who would two-time. Li Si looked at him and continued, the second possibility is that she is tired of you and doesn't want to waste her passion on you. Li Mu corrected, it's my friend. Li Si said, sorry, it's your friend. Li Mu and the Empress had a superior and subordinate relationship. They were not in a romantic relationship. He looked at Li Si and asked, what's the third possibility? Li Si didn't answer directly. Instead, he asked, can you beat Lady Lu now? Does this have anything to do with this question? I'm just asking. Li Mu thought for a moment and said, I can't beat him. This wasn't a question of whether or not he could beat her, but whether or not he could fight back. Even if Li Mu had transcended, he was still no match for Lu Hanyan. Li Si looked at him with an inexplicable gaze and said, the third possibility is, congratulations to you, no, congratulations to your friend. That woman likes him. She is sometimes cold and sometimes hot, sometimes aloof. These are all tricks between men and women. Only in this way would your friend feel nervous. If my guess is correct, after a short period of coldness, she will become passionate about your friend again. This time, Li Mu didn't agree with Li Si's analysis. Although he and the Empress weren't like Lord and Minister, they weren't lovers either. It was precisely because of this that he couldn't understand the Empress's sudden coldness. A woman's heart was like a needle at the bottom of the sea. Only a girl as cute and innocent as Xiao Bai, whose thoughts were written all over her face, didn't need him to guess. In the next few days, a rumor began to circulate among the court officials. Li Mu, the imperial censor of the palace, had fallen out of favor. First, he lost his status as a close official who could convey the Empress's decree. Then, when he asked to see the Empress, he was rejected. In the next few days, Li Mu didn't even attend the morning court, and the Empress didn't say anything about it. All of this showed that Li Mu had fallen out of favor. He had no status or background. The only thing he relied on was the Empress's favor. Without the Empress's favor, any random official in the court could kill him hundreds or thousands of times. Li residence. After the morning court, Zhang Chun hurried over. Li Mu was cooking in the kitchen. He said, Old Zhang, you came just in time. Go and call Li Si. Let's drink together, drink my ass. Zhang Chun quickly walked over and asked, what happened between you and the Empress? Li Mu said, nothing. Zhang Chun said anxiously, nothing? Everyone in the court is saying that you've fallen out of favor. Aren't you worried at all? Li Mu said indifferently, it's up to the Empress to decide whether I've fallen out of favor or not. What's the use of being worried? Zhang Chun hurriedly said, you're not worried, but I am. As someone who's been through it, let me give you a piece of advice. Between a man and a woman, if there's any misunderstanding between a man and a woman, it's better to talk it out. Don't hold it in. The longer you hold it in, the bigger the problem. Chapter 295. In order to clear the misunderstanding, Li Mu had to know what the misunderstanding was. He had done nothing wrong, but he was treated like this. Anyone would be angry. Zhang Chun tried his best to persuade him. The consequences of this are very serious. Think about it. You've offended so many people in Fairy's capital. Once you lose His Majesty's protection, many people won't be able to stop themselves from attacking you. As soon as he finished speaking, there was a knock on the door of the Li residence. Li Mu walked to the door and saw 2 constables standing outside. One of the constables looked at Li Mu and said nervously, Lord Li, there's a case that involves you. Please cooperate with us and follow us to the Ministry of Justice. Zhang Chun was shocked. He asked, someone's making a move so soon? The news that Li Mu had fallen out of favor had just spread, and the Ministry of Justice had already made a move. It seemed that some people hated him to the point where they couldn't tolerate it for even a moment longer. To prevent Xiao Bai from worrying, Li Mu told her to wait for him at home and not go out no matter what happened. Then, he gave the conch to Xiao Bai. If anything happened at home, she could contact the Empress instantly. After doing all this, he walked to the door again and said to the two constables, "Let's go." On the way to the Ministry of Justice, Li Mu asked the constable, "What case am I involved in?" The constable shook his head. "It's not convenient for me to reveal this. You'll know when you reach the Ministry of Justice." When he spoke to Li Mu, he was still cautious. The emperor's heart was unpredictable. Who knew if Li Mu had really fallen out of favor? If he was favored again in a few days, wouldn't the people who offended him be in big trouble? "Constable Li, where are we going?" This is the direction to the Ministry of Justice." "Is Constable Li going to the Ministry of Justice to cause trouble again?" "Quick, quick, quick. Follow Constable Li." After so long, there's finally something to watch. Every time Li Mu went to the Ministry of Justice, there would be a large crowd of people following him. However, this time, he wasn't the one bringing criminals to the Ministry of Justice. He was the one being sued. Ministry of Justice. The director of the Ministry of Justice paced anxiously in the courtyard. He didn't want to take this case at all. It wasn't easy for him to build a good relationship with Li Mu. He didn't want to waste all his previous efforts. However, that woman had sounded the grievance drum of the Ministry of Justice. The commoners were all watching outside, so he had to accept it. A moment later, he walked to the assistant minister's office and bowed to Zhou Zhong, who was sitting behind the table. He said, "Sir Assistant Minister, this case involves Master Li. I am worried that there will be a wrong judgment. How about we let Sir Assistant Minister preside over this case?" Zhou Zhong stood up and said, "All right." Li Mu arrived at the Ministry of Justice and entered the court. He saw Zhou Zhong sitting at the front, and a woman kneeling at the front. The woman was in her early 20s. Her hair was messy, and her face was filled with fear. When she saw Li Mu, she retreated a few steps, and her eyes were filled with terror. This was the first time Li Mu had seen this woman, but she seemed to be very afraid of him. Zhou Zhong looked down at Li Mu and asked, "There is a case that involves Imperial Censor Li. I will now ask you a few questions, and I hope you can answer truthfully." Li Mu said calmly, "Go ahead, Assistant Minister Zhou." Zhou Zhong said, "Where were you last night at midnight?" Li Mu said, "I was resting at home." Last night, he had been waiting for the Empress to fall asleep, and only slept very late. Zhou Zhong asked, "Is there a witness?" At midnight, Xiao Bai had already fallen asleep in her room. Li Mu shook his head and said, "No." Zhou Zhong said, "The person kneeling in front of the court is a woman from Yonghe Lane. She came to the Ministry of Justice today to report that she was raped at home last night at midnight. According to her, the person who raped her was you, Imperial Censor Li. Do you have anything to say about this?" Li Mu looked at the woman and said, "I was at home last night and did not go out. It is even more impossible for me to go to Yonghe Lane and rape her. Why is this lady falsely accusing me?" Zhou Zhong looked at Li Mu and said, "If Lord Li has a clear conscience, can you allow me to perform a soul search?" A soul search was different from a soul search. Under a soul search, a person's memories would be flipped through without any secrets. A soul search was only used to ask specific questions, and was most often used by the government during investigations. A soul search was useless against Li Mu. The art of tranquility could keep one's heart calm at all times. Not to mention Zhou Zhong, even the Empress could not use a soul search to find out the secrets in Li Mu's heart. He said directly to Zhou Zhong, "Assistant Minister Zhou's soul-searching technique is useless against me. There is no need to expend any more mana. Furthermore, under the circumstances where there is no evidence, it is against the law to search the soul of the accused. The accuser should produce evidence and not have the accused prove his innocence." Zhou Zhong thought for a moment and nodded. He looked at the woman again and asked, "Lady Su, you said that Censor Li raped you last night. Do you have evidence?" Lady Su raised her head and said, "I saw it with my own eyes and experienced it personally. It is the evidence." Zhou Zhong looked at her and said, Lord Li is an official of the imperial court. Since you want to accuse him, are you willing to accept a soul search? If you lie, I will punish you severely. Lady Su did not hesitate and said, I am willing. Zhou Zhong walked down and pressed his palm on her head. The woman's gaze gradually became dazed. After a moment, Zhou Zhong waved his hand and images appeared in front of everyone in the court. Although these images were static, it was not difficult to see what had happened last night when they were all connected. The images were very clear. It was obvious that a masked man in black had barged into the woman's house and violated her. At the critical moment, the woman pulled off the black cloth covering the man's face. Under the black cloth was Li Mu's face. Zhou Zhong looked at Li Mu and asked, Censor Li, do you have anything else to say? Li Mu did not explain anything. He only said, I believe that the Ministry of Justice will clear my name. Zhou Zhong said, although this case cannot be concluded, Lord Li, you are a major suspect. I'm afraid I can't let you leave the Ministry of Justice so easily. Men, take Li Mu into custody for now. After I investigate this case, I will try him again. 2 constables walked forward and said, Lord Li, please. In the court, the director of the Ministry of Justice had a look of disbelief. He said, that's impossible. I've seen the girl by Constable Li's side. She is 1,000 times more beautiful than this woman. How could Constable Li give up what is close at hand for what is far away? One of the constables said, that's not necessarily the case. How can a domestic flower be as fragrant as a wild flower? Some people might just like that. The director of the Ministry of Justice looked at Li Mu's back as he calmly left. Even important officials of the court would rarely be so calm when faced with a case like this. He was almost certain that Li Mu had a motive for being so calm. Zhou Zhong walked out of the court and was about to return to the yamen when a shout came from behind him. Stop! Zhang Chun angrily pointed at Zhou Zhong and said, You've so carelessly captured an official of the court. What can the memories of a mortal woman prove? Zhou Zhong asked calmly. The person who violated the woman looked exactly like Censor Li. Doesn't that prove anything? What does that prove? Zhang Chun snorted coldly and said, If I were to become Assistant Minister Zhou and do evil deeds, would you be blamed for the crime as well? Zhou Zhong asked, Lord Zhang, are you implying that a Realm 6 expert disguised himself as Censor Li to violate a woman and frame him for it? If Lord Zhang has Realm 6 cultivation and wants to frame me, the Imperial Clan Temple can use this as a reason to imprison me. Before the truth is out, I have nothing to say. Zhang Chun said, transformation techniques don't necessarily require Realm 6 supernatural powers. Transformation talismans and transformation pills can also transform the body and disguise one's appearance. Zhou Zhong asked, would someone use a heaven-grade Fulu and heaven-grade medicinal pill to frame Censor Li? Zhang Chun said coldly, Lord Li is dedicated to the people and offended all the officials of the fairy's capital. There are countless people in the fairy's capital who want to harm him. This is very likely. Zhou Zhong nodded and said, we can't rule out this possibility. However, we'll only know the truth after the Ministry of Justice's investigation. Zhang Chun flicked his sleeves and left. At this moment, the onlookers outside the Ministry of Justice were still discussing. Constable Li has been in there for so long. Why hasn't he come out yet? I don't know what happened either. Sigh, someone's coming out. A constable from the Ministry of Justice walked out and waved at the crowd. He said, what are you all doing here? Disperse, disperse. Some of the people went up and asked, what happened in there? Why hasn't Constable Li come out yet? Constable Li? The constable smiled disdainfully and said, to tell you the truth, I'm afraid Constable Li won't be coming out this time. What? What the hell is going on? Why can't Constable Li come out? Tell us clearly, or we won't leave today. Seeing that the crowd was getting more and more agitated, the constable was worried that the officials would hold him accountable if things got out of hand. He hurriedly said, your Constable Li is involved in a case of rape and has been sent to the Ministry of Justice's prison. Don't crowd around here. Disperse, disperse. As soon as he finished speaking, the onlookers were stunned for a moment before an even bigger commotion broke out. F asterisk King Bulsh asterisk T. How dare you insult Constable Li? Constable Li isn't that kind of person. The Ministry of Justice must be trying to frame Constable Li. Dog official, Constable Li is such a good person. How dare you frame him? Everyone, shout with me. Release him, release him. Release him. Release Constable Li. Inside the Ministry of Justice, hearing the deafening shouts outside, the constable of the Ministry of Justice sighed. If the people of Fairy's capital could treat me like this one day, my years as an official would have been worth it, an old official from the Ministry of Justice sighed. The person behind this is really scheming. No one knew about this at first, but with this commotion, everyone in Fairy's capital will know about it very soon. At that time, some people will definitely believe it. It's easy to ruin one's reputation, but it's hard to build one's reputation. If you want to kill someone, you have to go for their heart first. In a certain mansion in the North Court, a continuous conversation could be heard from a room. When the sound reached the door, it seemed to be blocked and absorbed by something and completely disappeared. Is that woman all right? She'll be fine. I asked someone to use the form disguise pill to transform into Li Mu's appearance. In that woman's eyes, the person who raped her was Li Mu. Even if the Ministry of Justice searched her soul, they would only see Li Mu. What if the Ministry of Justice searched Li Mu's soul? He's a cultivator and can tamper with his memories. Even if the Ministry of Justice searched his soul, the results wouldn't be enough to use as evidence. That woman is immortal, so her memories are more credible, but there will still be flaws. That's not important. Whether there are flaws or not depends on whether Li Mu is still favored or not. If His Majesty no longer protects him, he can be sent to his death with any random reason. After a short silence, a gnashing voice could be heard from the room. He must die, outside the Ministry of Justice. The people shouted for a while, but there was no response from the Ministry of Justice. Gradually, they fell silent. When Constable Li worked for the people, he was fearless. No matter if the other party was an official or a noble, or even the high and mighty academy, he would always seek justice for the people. However, when he was imprisoned in the Ministry of Justice and the people wanted to seek justice for him, they realized that there was nothing they could do other than stand at the entrance of the Ministry of Justice and shout weakly. Constable Li can't be such a person. Someone must be framing him. He has offended too many people for the sake of the people. How can these people tolerate him? I heard that Constable Li has fallen out of favor with His Majesty. Perhaps that's why those people attacked Constable Li. But why did Constable Li fall out of favor? He has always worked for the people and for His Majesty. The expressions on the people's faces changed from helplessness to worry. At this moment, someone in the crowd suddenly said, "You may know a person for a long time without understanding his true nature. Perhaps that Li Mu has always been pretending. This is his true nature. Otherwise, why would the Ministry of Justice arrest him?" As soon as that person finished speaking, someone grabbed him by the collar and pulled him out of the crowd. A burly man lifted him up and glared at him. He shouted, "Who do you think you are? How dare you speak of Constable Li like that?" When Constable Li was beating up those hedonistic villains and abolishing the Silver Penalty Act for the people, where were you? When Constable Li struck young ruffian Zhou with lightning and made the decision for that pitiful family, where were you? When Constable Li fought against the 3 major academies and cried out for the countless victims in Fairy's capital, where were you? Now that Constable Li is being framed, you jump out. Tell me, are you hired by the person who framed Constable Li? What are you trying to do by slandering Constable Li? It would have been better if that person didn't speak. Once he did, the indignant anger in the people's hearts finally found an outlet. In the past 3 months, Li Mu had used his actions to prove what kind of person he was. No one in Fairy's capital had the right to criticize him. Although they were in the great Zhou's capital of Fairy's capital, they had always been shrouded in darkness. It wasn't until Li Mu's appearance that the people finally saw a ray of light. Li Mu shone brightly in the hearts of the people of Fairy's capital. The only thing more dazzling than him was the sun in the sky. At this moment, he was being framed and someone was taking advantage of the situation to sow discord. This completely enraged the people who were already angry. In an instant, the people punched and kicked. The person who slandered Li Mu was immediately buried in their punches and kicks. If it weren't for the bailiffs from the Ministry of Justice who saw that something was wrong and stepped out to stop them, there would have been another tragic case in front of the Ministry of Justice before Li Mu's case was over. Because of the commotion in front of the Ministry of Justice, this case that was originally limited to the Ministry of Justice quickly spread. In the past few months, every incident related to Li Mu was at the heart of the storm in Fairy's capital. Naturally, his case spread very quickly. When the people of Fairy's capital heard this, they were naturally worried. However, there was nothing they could do. They could only silently march in front of the Ministry of Justice to express their protest. However, in the southern and northern courtyards, there were many voices that were different from the voices of the people. Li, to think that you would have such a day. When you bullied my grandson, you didn't think that you would have such a day, right? In the past, you had His Majesty protecting you. This time, without His Majesty, I'd like to see how you'll die. Before I could do anything, someone else beat me to it. I wonder who hates him so much. Could it be the Zhou family? In the past 3 months, the officials and nobles of Fairy's capital, regardless of whether they were from the new or old parties, had formed grudges with Li Mu. When they heard that Li Mu had been imprisoned, they all clapped their hands in joy. They couldn't even be satisfied with hearing about Li Mu's tragic case from others. Many of them personally came to the Ministry of Justice to see for themselves. This undoubtedly made them even happier. Faced with the officials and nobles who wanted to visit Li Mu, the director of the Ministry of Justice was in a difficult position. Of course, they could visit the prison. However, the Ministry of Justice had a rule that not everyone could visit the prison. There were rules regarding the identity of the person who visited the prison and the time of the visit. In principle, the relatives and friends of non-criminals were not allowed to visit the prison. However, the people who came to the Ministry of Justice were either officials or nobles. He couldn't afford to offend all of them. He walked to the assistant minister's office and asked Zhou Zhong, "Lord Assistant Minister, these people outside all want to visit the prison. Should we reject them?" "No need." Zhou Zhong waved his hand and said, "If they want to visit, let them. However, each visit can only be 2 people at most. They can't stay for more than half an hour." Since the assistant minister had spoken, the director of the Ministry of Justice didn't say anything else. He nodded and said, "I'll make the arrangements now." The prison of the Ministry of Justice. In a neat and tidy prison cell. Li Mu stood in the middle of the cell. This was his first time in the Ministry of Justice's prison. Compared to the county and provincial yamen, the prison of the Ministry of Justice was cleaner and tidier. There wasn't any odor in the prison either. Zhou Zhong had arranged a good cell for him. The inside of the cell was spotless. Li Mu had wanted to use his spells to clean it up, but later found that there was no need. He wasn't shackled and his mana wasn't restricted. If he really wanted to leave, the prison of the Ministry of Justice wouldn't be able to hold him. However, he wasn't in a hurry to leave. He wanted to know who was so impatient that they were willing to use fulu and pills just to frame him. Footsteps came from outside. 2 people appeared outside the cell. One of them was someone Li Mu had seen before. It was the vice director of the Ministry of Revenue, Wei Teng. The other person was someone Li Mu didn't recognize. The person stood outside the cell and took the initiative to introduce himself. "Lord Li may not know who I am. Let me introduce myself. I am the director of the Ministry of Rights, Zhu Qi. Zhu Tsong is my son." Li Mu had already noticed that this person looked similar to Zhu Kong. He glanced at the 2 of them and asked, "What are you doing here?" Zhu Qi said, "I was shocked to hear that Lord Li was imprisoned. I wanted to come and take a look." Wei Ting quickly followed and said, "Lord Li is a pillar of the country and a favorite of His Majesty. How could he do such a despicable thing? If you need any help, just ask. I won't help you." "Ha ha ha." Wei Ting looked at Li Mu in the cell and laughed happily. His hatred for Li Mu was even greater than Zhu Qi's. Because of Li Mu, he lost his nephew. His only younger brother lost his son. Since then, he was unable to recover from the setback and cut off all contact with him. As for his son Wei Peng, he also suffered an unprecedented blow because of that incident. Since Wei Bin's execution, Wei Peng had never stepped out of the Wei mansion. He hugged a thick copy of the Law of Great Zhou all day long. He read it when he walked, when he ate, and even when he went to the toilet. Even when he slept, he would use the book as a pillow. Wei Ting saw his son's abnormality and his heart ached. He blamed all of this on Li Mu. Wei Ting and Zhu Qi laughed happily. Li Mu looked at them indifferently and said, "Scram." Wei Ting's face darkened. He said sternly, "Don't you know where you are? Don't you know your own situation? What right do you have to be arrogant in front of us?" Zhu Qi sneered and said, "I'd like to see how long you can be arrogant." At this moment, a prison guard walked in and said to the two of them, "Lords, it's time to visit the prisoners." The two of them looked at Li Mu mockingly again and turned to leave. Li Mu watched the two of them leave. He shook his head and said in a low voice, "It's not, they were not the ones who framed him." Soon, another person walked in from outside. It was an old man with white hair and a face full of wrinkles. As soon as he entered the cell, he looked at Li Mu and said, "Lord Li, do you know me?" Li Mu glanced at him and asked, "Who are you?" The old man snorted and said, "I'm the deputy of Taichung Temple. 2 months ago, you beat up my grandson 3 times and broke 5 of his ribs. You don't know who I am?" Li Mu said, "Is the Prime Minister of Taichung Temple senile? The one I hit was your grandson, not you. Why should I know you?" The deputy of Taichung Temple pointed at him and said in a trembling voice, You're too arrogant." Li Mu said coldly, "It's not the first time I've been so arrogant." "Is this the first time you know?" The Taichung Temple deputy prime minister had come to mock Li Mu, but he did not expect that not only did Li Mu fail to mock him, but he also angered himself. He pointed at Li Mu, his beard trembling, and said angrily, I'll wait and see if you can still be so arrogant in a few days." After saying this, he angrily stormed off in a huff. Li Mu looked at the back of the deputy of Taichung Temple and shook his head. He said, "Not really, the director of the Ministry of Rights, the minister counselor of the Ministry of Revenue, and the deputy of Taichung Temple were the first to mock him. Obviously, they were not the ones behind the scenes." Li Mu sighed as he stood in the prison cell. Usually, he did not care. It was only at times like this that he realized how many enemies he had in Chengdu. There were so many that he did not even know who the mastermind was. A voice came from the door again, and Li Mu's gaze followed it. His enemies in Chengdu were honest. They seemed to be afraid that they would come too late. After Li Mu was released from prison, they came to the Ministry of Justice one after another to sightsee. The 2 people who came this time were both women, and they weren't young either. One of them had a rather charming figure, and was a young woman around 30 years old. The other person was even older, and didn't even have a hint of charm. The 2 of them did not come close. They only glanced at Li Mu from afar and turned to leave without saying a word. The woman next to the young woman looked at Li Mu with a gaze filled with bone-deep hatred. Li Mu could feel a strong resentment and malice from her. Her disgust for Li Mu was even greater than that of the other 3 combined. Li Mu's eyes flashed. He sensed something and looked at the prison guard. He said, "You, come over here." The prison guard at the door ran over quickly and asked anxiously, What do you want?" Li Mu glanced at him and asked, "Who are the 2 women who came in just now?" The prison guard shook his head and said, "I don't know." "Go and ask." "Do you think the prison guard was indignant. After exchanging glances with Li Mu, he could not help but tremble and run out quickly. After a while, he ran back in and said, "I asked. It's the 4th Madam of the Zhou family and the wife of the Minister of Rights." The wife of the Minister of Rights is the daughter of the 4th Madam of the Zhou family, Director Zhou. Li Mu said the name softly. His guess was confirmed. There were many people in the divine capital who hated him, but Zhou Ting and his wife were definitely 2 people who hated him to the core. Their only son had died at the hands of Li Mu. Li Mu had always been wary of Zhou Ting, but after Zhou Ting left office, he stayed in the Zhou family and did not leave. Li Mu thought that he was plotting a bigger scheme, but he did not expect that the first to act would be his wife. Since he had found the mastermind, there was no need for him to stay in the Ministry of Justice. He looked at the prison guard again and said, "Call Zhou Zhong over." The prison guard did not dare to talk back this time and ran out. Not long after, Zhou Zhong walked slowly into the prison. He looked at Li Mu and asked, censorly, "Do you have anything else to say?" Li Mu said indifferently, "That woman's matter has nothing to do with me. Someone framed her." Zhou Zhong shook his head and said, "Lord Li's one-sided statement cannot be used as evidence." Li Mu asked, "Did the person who raped that woman succeed?" Zhou Zhong said, "That woman from the Su family had her chastity taken last night." Li Mu looked at him and said, "If that's the case, then this case cannot be done by me." Zhou Zhong asked, "Why?" Li Mu's face showed a trace of unnaturalness. He said, "Because this official hashtag at yen asterisk." Zhou Zhong took a step forward and tilted his ear. He said, "I didn't hear you clearly. Please repeat yourself, Lord Li." Li Mu's forehead darkened. He gritted his teeth and said, "Because this official's primordial yang is still there." Zhou Zhong's expression was clearly stunned. Not only him, but even the prison guard was stunned. The two of them had never imagined that Li Mu would be able to use such a reason to clear himself of suspicion. But when they thought about it carefully, it seemed that no testimony would be as powerful as this one. This was a special case to begin with. That woman had been raped and her chastity taken. Naturally, that criminal had done something indescribable with her. In other words, the criminal of this case had to be someone who had been through it before. It was impossible for him to be a virgin. A man's primordial yang would be lost the first time he fused with a woman. If Li Mu's primordial yang was still there, then he naturally could not be the criminal who raped that woman. After Zhou Zhong came back to his senses, he looked at Li Mu and said, "I'll have to trouble Lord Li to extend your right hand." Li Mu impatiently extended his hand. Zhou Zhong was clearly not like Xiao Bai, who could see through his chastity with a single sentence. Zhou Zhong placed his hand on Li Mu's wrist and withdrew it a moment later. He immediately ordered the prison guard behind him, "Open the door." The prison guard hurriedly took out a key and opened the door. Li Mu walked out of the cell and glanced at Zhou Zhong. He said, "The Ministry of Justice, I'll remember this." Zhou Zhong shook his head and said, "You can't blame the Ministry of Justice. If Lord Li had been able to produce this evidence in court, then you wouldn't have been temporarily detained." Zhou Zhong was speaking nonsense. There were so many people in court. Using such a method to prove his innocence in front of those people was shameless, but Li Mu was. This was one reason. The other reason was that Li Mu wanted to lure the snake out of its hole, to draw out the true mastermind behind this case. Zhou Zhong walked to the door of the prison and extended his hand. He said, "Lord Li, please," at the same time that Li Mu and Zhou Zhong walked out of the prison, in the Li residence. Xiao Bai was anxiously pacing around in the courtyard. Although she didn't go out, she still heard the people outside talking about the matter. Her benefactor was in danger, but she couldn't help at all. In the end, she gritted her teeth and took out a conch. After activating it with her mana, she said with a sobbing voice, "Sister Zhou, please save my benefactor, Tranquil Palace." Zhou Yi, who was sitting cross-legged on the brocade couch, entered an ethereal state to avoid her inner demons. Suddenly, she opened her eyes. She waved her hand lightly and an image appeared in front of her. It was the image of Li Mu being locked up in the Ministry of Justice's prison. Her expression changed slightly. Her figure flashed and appeared outside Tranquil Palace. She asked, "What happened to Li Mu?" Mr. Mei had also just received the news and was hesitating whether he should inform the Empress. He immediately said, "Your Majesty, Li Mu was framed and locked up in the Ministry of Justice's prison." She finally could not hold back the doubts in her heart these past few days and asked, "Your Majesty, what did Li Mu do to make your Majesty unhappy?" Zhou Yi was puzzled. "Why do you ask?" Mr. Mei said helplessly, "Please forgive Mei Wei for asking too much. Your Majesty has been too cold to him these days, so much so that there are rumors in the court that Your Majesty is dissatisfied with him. Li Mu has fallen out of favor. The only reason he can live peacefully in the fairies' capital is because Your Majesty has his back. He can't live without Your Majesty. Once Your Majesty abandons him, the various forces in the fairies' capital will make a move on him. Zhou Yi couldn't tell Mei Wei that she was avoiding Li Mu because she wanted to control her inner demons. She also didn't expect that her actions would cause such serious consequences. Mr. Mei continued, Li Mu can't live without Your Majesty. Your Majesty's actions will disappoint him. With his personality, Your Majesty might lose him forever. Not only Li Mu couldn't live without her, but she couldn't live without Li Mu either. In this cold court, only Li Mu could bring her some warmth. Zhou Yi had already realized the severity of the situation. She said, go to the Ministry of Justice and bring him out immediately. Forget it, I'll go myself. As soon as he finished speaking, his face turned into Mr. Mei's and he disappeared into thin air. Ministry of Justice. Li Mu walked out of the prison and found a group of people outside. The director of the Ministry of Rights, the minister of the Ministry of Revenue, and the minister of the Taichung Temple hadn't left yet. They were shocked when they saw Zhou Zhong and Li Mu walk out. Why is he out? Why did the Ministry of Justice let him out? Is there any law here? Zhou Zhong walked in front of them and said, this case has nothing to do with Lord Li. The Ministry of Justice caught him by mistake. The minister of the Taichung Temple said angrily, that woman has already identified him. You've also searched her soul. This case was obviously done by Li Mu. How can you protect him like this? Zhou Zhong said calmly, the Ministry of Justice only cares about evidence when handling cases. Lord Li has evidence to prove that this case has nothing to do with him. The director of the Ministry of Rights said in disbelief, what evidence? Zhou Zhong glanced at Li Mu and said, Lord Li is still a Yuanyang body. As soon as he finished speaking, there was silence in the room. There was no better reason than this to clear him of suspicion in this case. After all, it was impossible for a rapist to still be a virgin after the rape. Perhaps even the mastermind behind the scenes would never have guessed that Li Mu was a fledgling. They couldn't understand why Li Mu was such a handsome man. He could have any woman he wanted. How could he be a virgin? Moreover, the woman beside him was so beautiful. How could he hold himself back? Was he even a man? Seeing everyone's eyes and expressions, Li Mu wished he could sew Zhou Zhong's mouth shut. However, he was no match for Zhou Zhong. His gaze swept across the director of the Ministry of Rights, the minister of the Ministry of Revenue, and the minister of the Taichung Temple. He said, you guys are very good. The three of them felt a chill run down their spines, straight to their heads. No one expected that Li Mu would be able to escape so quickly. Based on his past temperament, the three of them probably wouldn't have a good life in the future. Looking at Li Mu's back as he left, the director of the Ministry of Rights said with a pale face, what do we do now? The minister of the Ministry of Revenue snorted and said, what are you afraid of? The current Li Mu is no longer the Li Mu of the past. Without His Majesty, what is he? The minister of the Taichung Temple was also relieved. He agreed and said, that's right. He escaped once, but can he escape a second time or a third time? There are countless people in Luoyang who want him dead. He won't be able to jump around for long. The three of them comforted themselves in such a way, and their anxious hearts finally relaxed. Zhou Zhong glanced at them and asked, are the three of you so sure that Li Mu has really fallen out of favor? The three of them, who had just relaxed, suddenly became worried again. The director of the Ministry of Rights asked, Sir Zhou, what do you mean by that? Zhou Zhong shook his head and said, it's hard to fathom a ruler's heart. Once in favor, once out of favor, once out of favor, and once again back into favor. This has happened a lot in history. You guys are too impatient. When Li Mu walked out of the Ministry of Justice, he was surprised to see Mr. Mei walk in. Mr. Mei was surprised to see Li Mu. He asked, why did you come out? Li Mu said, I didn't do it in the first place. It'll be fine as long as I explain it clearly. Mr. May asked, how did you explain it? Li Mu waved his hand and said, that's not important. He looked up at the sky and said, it's almost lunchtime. Sister May, do you want to go home with me and have a meal before going back to the palace? Mr. May thought for a moment and said, His Majesty hasn't eaten yet. I'll go back and ask His Majesty first, Li Mu said lightly. It's better not to call His Majesty. There's not enough food at home. There's only enough for 3 people. Mr. May said, then I'll go to the market with you to buy some food. Li Mu shook his head and said, forget it. I suddenly don't feel like cooking. I'll just go back and eat some steamed buns and salted vegetables with Xiao Bai. Goodbye, Sister May. Mr. May watched Li Mu's figure disappear from her sight. She stood there in a daze, with a confused and helpless expression on her face. After a moment, she withdrew her gaze and slowly walked toward the palace gate. Tranquil Palace. Zhou Yi looked at Mr. May and asked, was I really wrong? Mr. May's lips moved, but he didn't know what to say. When Her Majesty was young, she focused on cultivation and rarely had contact with others. She was used as a pawn by the Zhou family. After she ascended the throne, she was high above the masses, and no one around her could talk to her. Although she wasn't young, she didn't have much experience and didn't know how to get along with others. Almost everyone around her was respectful to her. They only obeyed her and did not dare to resist. However, Li Mu did not belong to that, almost, exception. She couldn't say that the Empress was wrong. She could only say, I hope Your Majesty doesn't blame Li Mu. He's loyal to Your Majesty and is full of passion. It's inevitable that he'll feel sad and disappointed when something like this happens. This shows that he's really loyal to Your Majesty. Zhou Yi thought for a moment and said, then it's my fault. It was nighttime. Li Mu lay on the bed, unable to calm down. He didn't care about being framed and imprisoned because those people were his enemies. This was what his enemies should do. Meanwhile, he had been loyal and devoted to the Empress, clearing all obstacles for her. He had even cared about her life, relieving her of her worries and boredom. He had invited her to his home for a meal, and had even cooked her favorite food. However, his passion had been exchanged for indifference and alienation. He felt that it wasn't worth it. The human world wasn't worth it. He even considered whether he should take Xiao Bai back to the North County. At most, he wouldn't need the psyche power of the people of Chengdu. He didn't want to continue staying in this sad place. As he thought about it, he suddenly felt tired. He uncontrollably entered a dream and saw a familiar figure in the dream. Li Mu didn't want to see her now. He silently recited the Clear Heart chant and woke up from the dream. Tiredness came again, and he entered the dream again. He silently recited the Clear Heart chant and woke up from the dream again. Enter the dream, wake up. Enter the dream, wake up. After more than 10 times, Li Mu didn't feel tired anymore. However, there was another figure in front of his bed. Zhou Yi looked down at him and said, I was wrong. Li Mu immediately froze on the bed. To be able to connect the words, I was wrong, was an inconceivable thing. After he came back to his senses, he got up from the bed and asked subconsciously, where did you go wrong? P.S. This book has 10,000 words. 6,000 is the basic update, and 4,000 is the main update. When I was thinking about this plot yesterday, I felt that it would be better to finish it in one go. I specially set an alarm in the morning and wrote for about 10 hours. Now my eyes hurt and I have a headache, so I'm going to sleep. There will be no more updates today. Readers reading outside the website, if you think the writing is pleasing to your eyes, I hope you can come to the Chinese website to support the original version. Thank you. Chapter 296. As soon as Li Mu opened his mouth, he felt that it was somewhat inappropriate to ask this question. After all, she was the Empress, the ruler of a country. He could not treat the Empress like Lu Hanyan. However, he thought about it again. What was wrong with the Empress? Was it natural for the Empress to do something wrong? He was loyal to her, not because she was the Empress, nor was it because she was beautiful. It was only because she had obtained his approval. If she didn't know where she went wrong this time, it was very likely that she would do it again next time. She could always be cold to him, and she could also always be warm to him, but she couldn't always be hot and cold to him. Li Mu was working for her, not in love with her. What was this? Zhou Yi stood in front of the bed and thought for a while. She then said, "It was my fault for not being considerate enough and giving some people in the court an opportunity to take advantage of me and bring you so much trouble." She did not understand the main point of the matter. Li Mu gently shook his head and said, "I am not afraid of trouble, nor am I afraid of any enemy. As long as your majesty is behind me, even if my enemy is the entire court or the entire world, so what? What I am afraid of is that, for your majesty and the great Zhou, I will make the entire world my enemy, but when I turn around, I will find that there is no one behind me." In the darkness, Zhou Yi's gaze was somewhat absent-minded. She had never thought that someone would make the entire world his enemy for her. But after thinking about it, she realized that in the past few months, Li Mu had indeed done this. But what had she done? She had abandoned him and left him to face countless enemies alone. The reason he had so many enemies was not because of himself, but because of the great Zhou, because of her. Li Mu looked at the silent Zhou Yi and asked, "I would like to ask your majesty if I have done something to make your majesty unhappy. If I have offended your majesty, would your majesty please make it clear? Even if your majesty wants me to die, please let me die with a clear understanding. Do not let me be muddle-headed, no, no." Zhou Yi couldn't tell the truth in front of Li Mu. He could only say, yes, it was Zhen who encountered an inner demon. These days, Zhen has been suppressing the inner demon and has no time to care about other things. Therefore, Zhen neglected you. Li Mu was stunned for a moment. Then, shock appeared on his face. Her Majesty was a 7th realm transcendent cultivator. The inner demons of a cultivator of this level were extremely terrifying. Once the inner demons were born, their cultivation would be stagnant. This was already the best outcome. If it was more serious, his cultivation would regress, his mind would be affected by his inner demons, or he might even die. Then, he breathed a sigh of relief. So it was only the Empress suppressing her inner demons. He had thought that he had fallen out of favor. It was a misunderstanding, a misunderstanding. It's not a big deal. He raised his head to look at the Empress and said, "Your Majesty, please recite with me, your heart is as clear as ice. You will not be alarmed even if the sky collapses, you will remain steadfast, you will be happy and calm, you will not be stained by dirt, you will not be stained by vulgar things." In the end, the reason why inner demons were born was because the mind was in chaos. The art of tranquility was used to calm the mind. It wasn't just for inner demons. Soul manipulation arts, illusion arts, seduction arts, dream invading arts, and other arts that could affect one's mind to perform arts were all trash in front of the art of tranquility. Although this wasn't the most basic way to suppress inner demons, it was very effective in avoiding them. Heart is as clear as ice, you will not be alarmed even if the sky collapses. Zhou Yi didn't understand, but she still recited a few words in her heart with Li Mu. Then, a look of surprise appeared on her face. Ever since she came here, she had been suppressing the throbbing in her heart and suppressing the inner demons. With her 7th realm strength, it was still a bit difficult for her to completely suppress the inner demons. But after reciting a few words, the throbbing in her heart calmed down. This was obviously a spell that could quickly calm the mind. There were many spells for calming the mind in both Buddhism and Taoism. The royal family also had many secret spells. These days, Zhou Yi tried them one by one, but they didn't have much effect. Only the few spells that Li Mu taught her had an immediate effect. Her heart immediately calmed down, and she no longer felt the throbbing of her inner demons. Li Mu looked at Zhou Yi and asked, "Your Majesty, are you feeling better?" Zhou Yi nodded and said, "Much better." Li Mu explained, the art of tranquility can calm one's mind under any circumstances, but using it to suppress one's inner demons is still a temporary solution. Your Majesty, if you want to completely solve your inner demons, you have to start from the source. Zhou Yi said unnaturally, "I know." To start from the source, she had to start from Li Mu. But how should she start? She was silent for a while, then looked at Li Mu again and said, "From now on, I will always stand behind you. No matter what you encounter, just do it. You have me." With these words, Li Mu was much more relieved. But he couldn't help but regret and blame himself for misunderstanding the Empress. He had almost wronged her. At this time, Zhou Yi asked again, "Do you know who set you up?" Li Mu said, "Someone changed into my appearance, defiled that woman, and framed me. If it wasn't a Dongxian master, then someone used a transformation talisman and a false form elixir." The false form divine power could change one's body into a man or a woman, big or small, or a divine bird or a strange beast. It could only be used by see-through Xian stage cultivators who had a profound cultivation base. This was not a simple illusion, but an essential change from the inside to the outside. It was a great magical power beyond the understanding of ordinary people. The Dongxian magical power was extremely difficult to carve fulu and refine elixirs. Therefore, it was extremely rare and ranked in the heavenly realm. The heavenly realm fulu and elixirs were extremely difficult to carve and refine because of the precious materials. Most cultivators would choose to use them for attack or defense. This kind of fulu or elixir that didn't have great power but had special uses was even rarer. The Empress shook her head slightly and said, "It can't be Dongxian. There are not many masters in Dongxian. If they did, I would have sensed it. Someone must have used a false form fulu or elixir. Do you have any suspects?" Li Mu nodded and said, "I suspect it was Zhou Chu's mother. She has been holding a grudge against Zhou Chu for what happened last time. I saw her today in the prison of the Ministry of Justice." Fourth aunt, the Empress sighed softly and said, "She is my family. I can't tell if she has anything to do with this. Old Wang once said that no one could predict everything. There were many limitations in the art of divination. The closer one was to the person, the less accurate the result would be. Most of the time, the result of divination was only a sign or a feeling. It couldn't be confirmed at all." Even though Zhou Ting's wife wasn't related to the Empress by blood, they were still related by blood. Li Mu pondered for a moment before continuing. In the prison of the Ministry of Justice, the wife of the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights was with her. The Empress counted with her fingers and her face gradually turned cold. She said in a low voice, "It is indeed him." She looked at Li Mu gently and said, "Don't worry. I will get justice for you." Li Mu slept soundly that night. He no longer resented the Empress. What the Empress said later made him feel completely at ease. He even dreamed of the Empress in his dream. It wasn't the Empress who entered the dream, but Li Mu who dreamt of his own accord. If the Empress used the dream entering technique to invade Li Mu's dream, she would be able to see that there was another her in the dream. Li Mu originally enjoyed this dream very much. In the dream, he and the Empress relied on each other to keep each other warm. She supported Li Mu from behind, and Li Mu cut through all obstacles for her. He swept away all obstacles in the imperial court, subdued the Yao nation, pacified the ghost realm, suppressed the dragon race of the four seas, conquered the barbarians, and unified the countries of the Zhou continent. He also opened up new territory for the Great Zhou, conquered the 10 continents and 3 islands, and completed the unification of the world. He made the 10 continents live in peace and all the countries pay homage to him. Then, the Empress conferred him the title of Empress. When the officials attended court, he often accompanied the Empress. After court, he nestled in her arms with a shy face. "No." Li Mu suddenly woke up from his dream. He sat up on the bed and looked around. Thinking about the dream just now, his face was full of shock. The dream just now was simply too scary. In the dream, not only did he have to be a cow or horse for the Empress, he even had to sleep with her. Which normal man would want to marry an Empress? But then again, although her status was high and she was powerful, it wasn't impossible for her to be a wife. In this day and age, which wife could not be unreasonable, admit her mistakes, and protect her husband? She was rich and powerful. Although she wasn't gentle and considered enough, she was able to put down her pride and identity to take the initiative to admit her mistake instead of being unforgiving and unreasonable. Such a woman was hard to find even if one searched for a lantern. As Li Mu thought about it, he suddenly slapped himself and said angrily, "Bah, scumbag." Lu Hanyan was still in the North County, but he actually had such thoughts about the Empress. He really shouldn't have. After reflecting on himself for a while, Li Mu got up and washed up with Xiao Bai's help. The two ghosts had already prepared breakfast. After Li Mu finished eating, he went to the palace and prepared to go to court. At the entrance of the palace, the morning court had not started yet. The officials were already waiting outside the palace. In the line of officials, many people were discussing what happened yesterday. Li Mu was arrested and sent to the Ministry of Justice. Although they did not know why he was released later, the Empress did not interfere from beginning to end. What did this mean? It meant that Li Mu's fall from grace was very likely true. A few days ago, when the news of Li Mu's fall from grace spread like wildfire, many of them had been observing the situation from afar. After all, the Empress's heart was unpredictable. No one knew whether Li Mu's fall from grace was true or false. If the news was wrong, they would be impulsively attacking Li Mu and angering the Empress. Wouldn't they be courting death? Everyone was waiting for the first person to test the waters. They did not expect that someone would be so impatient. It had only been a few days, but they could not wait to attack Li Mu. This gave them a chance to verify it. Although Li Mu was released from the Ministry of Justice yesterday, he seemed to have used some method to prove his innocence. The Empress did not say anything about what had happened to him. This had already sent out a strong signal to everyone. If someone used this method to prove that the Empress did not care about Li Mu, he would be removed from the divine capital in less than a month. He would never appear in front of everyone again. Chapter 297. The imperial court had been peaceful for so long, and the sudden appearance of a disruptor was something that no one wanted to see. Perhaps Li Mu had no selfish motives, but it was precisely because of this that he was an eyesore. Without him, whether it was the old or new parties, or the other officials, their days would be much more comfortable. Before the imperial court, no discussion is allowed. While the officials were whispering, a stern voice came from outside the group of officials, interrupting their whispers. Everyone looked over and saw Li Mu wandering outside the group, his sharp gaze sweeping over the crowd. Li Mu was the imperial censor of the imperial court. His main responsibility was to inspect the officials' manners during the imperial court and correct their improper behavior. The emperor used to use him as a personal guard, but now that Li Mu had fallen out of favor, he was only the imperial censor of the imperial court. He had the right to reprimand the officials before the imperial court. The crowd stopped talking, but they sneered in their hearts. The days when he could strut around like this were numbered. Li Mu walked to a certain place and looked at an official. The physician of the Board of Rites, Zhu Qi, also looked at Li Mu, his heart inexplicably weak. Li Mu coldly asked, "What are you looking at?" This was not the past, when the silver law of guilt had been abolished. Zhu Qi did not believe that if he looked at Li Mu one more time, Li Mu would dare to beat him like he had beaten his son in front of the officials. If he really dared to do so, he would not be far from death. Zhu Qi coldly snorted and asked, "What, can't I look at you?" Li Mu shrugged and said, "Of course you can." Zhu Qi looked at him, his gaze even more unbridled, a trace of mockery in his contempt. Li Mu's tone changed and he said, "You can look at me, but you are not wearing your official hat properly. According to the law, you will be caned 10 times and your salary will be deducted for half a month." Men, drag the physician of the Board of Rites to the side, seal his cultivation, and punish him with 10 canes as a warning to others. Zhu Qi's expression changed as he shouted, "How can there be such a law?" Li Mu stretched out his hand and a copy of the Great Zhou Laws appeared in his hand. He flipped to a page and pointed it out to Zhu Qi, saying, "Look for yourself." The third article of the 35th volume of the Great Zhou Laws states that officials must tidy up their attire before attending court. Those who are disheveled will be regarded as disrespectful in front of the monarch. Their salary will be deducted for half a month and they will be caned 10 times. Have I said anything wrong? Zhu Qi stared blankly at this clause. It was written in black and white. Unless Li Mu had the guts to change the laws of Great Zhou, what he said was true. Tampering with the laws of Great Zhou was a capital offense. There was no way he would fabricate this just to give him 10 beatings. Li Mu shook his head and said, "This is the rule set by the previous emperor. You didn't follow it when it came to His Majesty. It is clear that you have no respect for His Majesty. If I don't teach you a lesson today, I'm afraid you won't respect His Majesty in the future." He looked at the 2 guards in front of the palace and said, "What are you waiting for? Start the punishment." The 2 guards looked at each other and didn't move. They hadn't been on duty for long and hadn't heard of this rule. Mr. May walked over from afar and looked at the 2 lightly. He asked, "Didn't you hear what Sir Li said? Disrespectful in front of the palace was a serious offense in the previous emperor's time. 10 beatings is already a light punishment. What are you waiting for?" Seeing that Commander May had spoken, the 2 didn't dare to hesitate. They walked up to Zhu Qi and said, "Sir, please." Zhu Qi's expression was stiff and his throat moved. He walked with difficulty and left with the 2 guards. Li Mu used the law to suppress him. He didn't even have a chance to resist. He swore in his heart that when he returned, he would take a good look at the laws of Great Zhou. What kind of bullsh** T rule was this? Zhu Qi was taken away to receive his punishment. The officials beside him were very nervous. Some of them even used their mana to adjust their official hats. Some of the officials who had been on the court during the previous emperor's time even remembered the rules of the previous emperor's time. Disrespectful in front of the palace was a crime that existed during the previous emperor's time. Many officials had been punished because of this. After the empress succeeded the throne, she didn't care about this anymore. When the officials went to court, they also became casual. Most importantly, they didn't have to worry about it anymore. Who would have thought that Li Mu would bring this up again today? He brought out all the provisions of the law. No one could say that he was wrong unless the officials all agreed to abolish this law. But that was a matter for the future. Li Mu didn't care about the frightened officials and continued to patrol outside. As he walked, his footsteps stopped again. He stood in front of Wei Teng, the minister-counselor of the Ministry of Revenue. Wei Teng's forehead was covered in cold sweat. He finally understood what Li Mu meant when he said those last words to the 3 of them yesterday. Revenge. This was undisguised revenge. Li Mu stood in front of Wei Teng. At first glance, he didn't find anything strange. At second glance, he also didn't find anything strange. So he began to look carefully, up and down, front and back, left and right. At this moment, Wei Teng really wanted to curse. When Li Mu walked past the other officials, he only glanced at them. When he came to Wei Teng, he had already looked at them for the time it took to brew a cup of tea. Wei Teng's official hat was properly worn and his clothes were neat. But his efforts didn't let him down. Li Mu still found a stain on his sleeve. Li Mu looked at him and said, "Lord Wei, the official robes you are wearing aren't just official robes. They are also the symbol of the Great Zhou, the face of the court. The previous emperor requested that when the officials go to court, their clothes must be neat and tidy, and their official robes must not be stained. Have you forgotten?" The 2 guards who had punished Zhu Qi had already returned. Li Mu looked at Wei Teng, his expression gradually becoming cold. He said, "Forfeit your salary for half a month, 10 strokes of the cane." After the 2 guards examined him, they also took Wei Teng away. Li Mu continued forward. The director of the Ministry of Justice lowered his head to look at a conspicuous hole in his official robes. Sweat began to seep out of his forehead. The director of the Ministry of Rights just didn't wear his hat properly, and the vice director of the Ministry of Revenue just had a stain on his sleeve, yet he was already beaten 10 times. His official robes had a hole. He had lost the face of the court. Wouldn't he be beaten at least 50 times? He looked at Li Mu out of the corner of his eye and found that he had already walked in front of him. He stopped in front of him. His gaze wasn't right. He seemed to be looking at the hole in his official robes. It's over, it's over. He found it. Li Mu walked in front of the director of the Ministry of Justice, gave him a look, and slowly walked past him. The director of the Ministry of Justice froze in place. Li Mu was letting him go just like that? After Li Mu left for a long time and didn't come back, he finally felt completely at ease. Li Mu really had let him go. Although it was clear that he was taking revenge on the 3 people who had gone to the Ministry of Justice to watch the show yesterday, the 2 of them also had old grudges. Whether he would be punished or not, it would be up to Li Mu to decide. The director of the Ministry of Justice heaved a sigh of relief and felt a little touched. It seemed that Li Mu had indeed forgotten the grudges between them and remembered that he had helped him before. Li Mu was different from other people in the court. Although Li Mu was sometimes annoying, he was a person who could distinguish between kindness and hatred. He was a person worthy of deep friendship. Walking past the director of the Ministry of Justice, Li Mu went straight to the side of the minister of Taichung Temple. The minister of Taichung Temple looked ahead. Even though he had already guessed that Li Mu would not let him go easily after taking revenge on the director of the Ministry of Rights and the minister-counselor of the Ministry of Revenue, he was not afraid. He had a slight obsession with cleanliness. Normally, he would often use disguising techniques. His official robes were impervious to fire and water, dirt, holes, and dirt. His official hat was also properly worn. Even with Li Mu's discerning eyes, he could not find anything that could be used against him. Li Mu walked in front of the minister of Taichung Temple and sized him up for a long time. He could not find anything wrong with him. His official robe was spotless. It was obvious that he had cast a concealment technique on it. His official hat was also properly worn. Under such circumstances, if Li Mu still made things difficult for him, it would mean that he was trying to harm him. He observed for a while more and suddenly looked at the feet of the minister of Taichung Temple. The minister of Taichung Temple also noticed Li Mu's actions. His heart skipped a beat. Could it be that he had woken up in a hurry and put on his shoes the wrong way? He did not remember. However, after this thought appeared in his mind, he felt that his feet were somewhat uncomfortable. Especially since Li Mu had been staring at his feet for a long time without saying anything. This made him panic. Finally, he could not help but look down. Luckily, there was nothing wrong with his shoes. However, because he lowered his head, the official hat on his head accidentally bumped into the hat of an official in front of him. It fell to the ground. Li Mu looked regretfully at the minister of Taichung Temple and said, "Today's morning court session was a little different from usual. Other than the officials at the very front, most of the officials standing in the middle and at the back of the court were standing straight. Their official robes were neat and their official hats were properly placed. They were much more energetic than usual. This was because there were 3 officials who had already been fined their salaries and given beatings because of their impoliteness in front of the court. The atmosphere in the court was also different from usual because of this. They did not know what was wrong with Li Mu today. He suddenly brought up the old system of the previous emperor. It should be known that before this, he was strongly opposed to the various systems established by the previous emperor. Only a few people, such as the Minister of Justice, understood why the 3 officials were punished. Li Mu stood in the corner. This was the only thing he felt that the previous emperor had left behind that was useful in his decades on the throne. Yesterday, the 3 of them had said that they wanted to see how long Li Mu could be arrogant. Today, he would let them see with their own eyes. The person who presided over the morning court session today was still Mr. Mei. As soon as Mr. Mei announced the start of the morning court session, Zhang Chun stood up and said, "Your Majesty, I have a report." He held the ceremonial tablet and said, "I want to impeach the Assistant Minister of Justice, Zhou Zhong." As the Assistant Minister of Justice, he abused his power and imprisoned Imperial Censor Li Mu on a groundless charge. Where is the dignity of the law? Li Mu was comforted. Elder Zhang was his only true friend in the entire court. When he became successful in the future, he would treat him better. Mr. Mei looked at Zhou Zhong and asked, "Mr. Zhou, what do you have to say?" Zhou Zhong said, Mr. Zhang is lying. As the Assistant Minister of Justice, I handled the case according to the law. That woman was raped, and I saw from her memory that the person who raped her looked similar to Imperial Censor Li. It was reasonable and legal to detain him temporarily. Later, Imperial Censor Li told me that he was still a Yuanyang body. After he was cleared of suspicion, I immediately let him go. How is this abuse of power? Hearing this, the courtiers were in an uproar. I was wondering why the Ministry of Justice suddenly let him go. So his Yuanyang body is not broken. It can be cleared of suspicion like this? This is unheard of. I have learned something new. Is he really a Yuanyang body? Li Mu glared fiercely at Zhou Zhong with a murderous gaze. When he realized that everyone in the hall was looking at him, he quietly moved his feet and hid himself behind a pillar. Chapter 298. In Crepe Myrtle Palace, Li Mu hid behind a pillar, wishing he could tear Zhou Zhong's mouth apart. He still had his yang energy. Not only did he not feel ashamed, he even felt a little proud. If it weren't for the fact that his primordial yang was still there, how could this case be explained so quickly? But pride was one thing. Pride and making the case known to the whole world were two different things. That damned Zhou Zhong. He had been a bachelor for decades. What right did he have to criticize him? After Zhang Chun's incident, the order in the imperial court was a little chaotic. Many people knew that Li Mu was sent to the Ministry of Justice's prison yesterday and later came out. But they only knew the result, not the process. Some people even guessed that His Majesty had secretly instructed the Ministry of Justice. If that was the case, whether Li Mu had fallen out of favor would have to be re-evaluated. But then again, this case was really a disaster. No matter how many people hated Li Mu, they had to admit that he was as handsome as Cui Ming. He was the most handsome man in the divine capital. If he was willing, countless women would throw themselves at him and be his groom every night. But the truth was that such a person was just a virgin. Even the person who framed him must not have thought of this. Otherwise, he would not have framed Li Mu for rape. Today's morning court session ended quickly. To everyone's surprise, His Majesty did not say a word about Li Mu's being framed. This confirmed a conjecture. That person had really fallen out of favor. After the court, Li Mu went to Tranquil Palace to seek an audience with the Empress. But he was still rejected, and he left the palace alone. All of this was seen by a palace made at the entrance of Tranquil Palace. The officials in the palace, such as the palace secretary and the minister of the 3 provinces, also saw Li Mu's lonely figure leaving the palace. This news quickly spread to all the residences in the north and south courtyards. Zhu residence. Zhu Qi was lying on his bed. In the morning, his cultivation had been restricted, and he had been caned 10 times. He had just taken a medicinal pill to treat his injuries. When he heard the news, he immediately sat up in bed and gritted his teeth. Li Mu, just you wait. Then, a scream came from the room, followed by the sound of something heavy falling on the bed. Wu Manor. Although the old Taichung Temple deputy had supernatural powers and cultivation base, his cultivation base was limited when he used the cane. He endured 10 canes with his old bones. At this moment, he was also lying on the bed and asked, "Is what you said true?" A middle-aged man said, "It's absolutely true." He was framed, and the Empress didn't say anything. This time, he must have really fallen out of favor, Taichung Temple's deputy prime minister said gloomily. "When I recover in 2 days, it will be the time of Li Mu's death." Wei Estate. Wei Teng was limping around in the courtyard. He had taken some medicinal pills and used Fulu. His injuries were much better now. When he heard about what had happened after the court was dismissed, he was overjoyed. This would be the last time he suffered a loss at the hands of Li Mu. As long as the emperor no longer protected him, with the power of the old party, Li Mu would be at their mercy. Ministry of Rights Assistant Minister's Estate. A woman said hatefully, "I didn't succeed last time. This time, I'll make sure she dies without a complete corpse." The news that Li Mu had fallen out of favor caused quite a stir among the officials and nobles. In front of the Li manor, Zhang Chun knocked on the door with a worried expression. This time, he was really panicking. Li Mu had been framed, but the emperor was indifferent. After the court was dismissed, he went to see the emperor but was rejected. The matter was much more serious than he had imagined. He didn't want to live in a big house with 5 entrances. He also didn't want to have a group of maids and servants. As a friend, he had to remind Li Mu to leave the divine capital as soon as possible. He had to get further and further away from here and never come back. As for himself, he had to consider resigning from his position. Zhang Chun knocked on the door of the courtyard. As soon as the door opened, he smelled a fragrance. It was the familiar fragrance of hot pot. Li Mu stood at the door and asked, "Why are you here, OL Zhang?" Zhang Chun was about to speak when he suddenly saw a figure beside the stove in the courtyard. It was a beautiful woman. She was putting a piece of tofu from the pot into a bowl. The moment he saw the woman's face, Zhang Chun's head buzzed. The news that Li Mu had fallen out of favor had spread like wildfire. Who would have thought that the empress would refuse Li Mu's request to see her and eat hot pot with him in the Li manor an hour later? No one would believe it if he told them about it. When he came back to his senses, he immediately looked at Li Mu and said, "It's nothing. I just came to tell you that we should have a meal together when you're free." Li Mu said, "We're eating. Do you want to come in and eat with us?" Zhang Chun quickly waved his hand and said, "I can't today. Maybe another day. My wife is waiting for me at home. Goodbye." He turned around and left. However, he did not return to his residence. Instead, he went to a broker in the divine capital and said to a broker, "Check if there are any empty courtyards in the divine capital. I won't consider those below the 5th rank. As long as they're above the 5th rank, Ministry of Justice." After the director of the Ministry of Justice reported to Zhou Zhong, he could not help but ask, "Sir, has Lord Li really fallen out of favor?" Zhou Zhong said calmly, "I'm afraid only His Majesty knows about this." The director shook his head and said, "What a pity." He then realized that he had misspoken. He looked up and was relieved when he saw that the assistant minister did not hear him. Zhou Zhong stood up and walked out of the Ministry of Justice. The director hurriedly chased after him and asked, "Where are you going, sir?" "I still have some things to report." Zhou Zhong waved his hand and said, "Let's talk about it tomorrow. I have an appointment with a friend today. We're going fishing outside the city, Ministry of Rights." An official walked into a government office and said to someone in the office, "Director Liu, the assistant minister is going to impeach Li Mu tomorrow. Should we follow him?" That person looked up at him and asked, "Why should we follow the assistant minister's impeachment?" The official said, "The assistant minister has this intention. You've just come to the Ministry of Rights, so you shouldn't curry favor with the assistant minister. After all, Li Mu has fallen out of favor. You don't have to worry about His Majesty blaming you for impeaching him. Perhaps His Majesty is waiting for someone to impeach him." That person waved his hand and said, "If you want to go, you go." "I'm not going." The director of the Ministry of Rights left helplessly. The Ministry of Rights originally only had one director. Later, for the imperial examinations, the imperial court added another one. However, this new director Liu did not seem to understand the ways of officialdom. Director Zhu was biased towards the old party. However, he did not dare to disobey the assistant minister. He had just come to the Ministry of Rights, but if he did not listen to the assistant minister, he would not have a good life in the future. After the director of the Ministry of Rights left, Director Liu curled his lips and said, "Impeach my ass. A bunch of idiots." Prince Shou's residence. Prince Shou liked to listen to operas. In addition to the stage built in the residence, there was also more than one opera troupe. Today, he seemed to be particularly interested. After listening to a few plays, he waved his hand at the performers on the stage and said, "I'm not listening to Prince Consort Shui today. Sing Taizu Fishing for me, Zhou residence." During the meal in the Zhou residence, Zhou Xiong ate a few mouthfuls and put down his chopsticks. He looked at Zhou Jing and said, "Big brother, this time, Li Mu will not be able to escape this calamity. Should we call fourth brother out? If he sees this scene, he will be very happy. Will not be able to escape this calamity? Zhou Jing looked at him and asked, how so? Zhou Xiong said, Li Mu has already lost the emperor's favor. As far as I know, this time, whether it's our people or the old party, they all want to get rid of Li Mu completely. Fourth brother hates him to the bone. We have to let him see it with his own eyes. Zhou Jing put down his chopsticks and said, use your brain and think about it. With Wu Er's personality, even if it's not her close official, if any official in the imperial court was framed and slandered in such a despicable way, she will not do anything. Will she not let the Ministry of Justice and the Supreme Court investigate? Zhou Xiong was stunned and said in shock, this, Zhou Jing said, how can I not understand my own daughter? If she wasn't really angry, she wouldn't have done this. The next morning court will probably be very lively. Zhou Xiong's expression changed and said, what should we do? The matter of framing Li Mu was obviously instigated by my sister-in-law. The director of the Ministry of Rights is in danger. We have to remind him that the imperial examination is imminent. Nothing can happen to him, it's too late. Zhou Jing said, last time, the Zhou family didn't do as she wanted. Now, she hates you and me to the bone. She won't even return to the Zhou family and won't listen to you. If she had succeeded in framing Li Mu last time, it would have been fine. But if she had failed, the director of the Ministry of Rights would have been lost. It's too late for you to remind her now. Zhou Xiong was stunned and muttered, could this be Li Mu's scheme again? Zhou Jing didn't deny it and said, I'm afraid that even his fall from grace last time was fake news released by him and Wu Er. Zhou Xiong said with a sullen face, Her Majesty used to be so naive and pure. How did she become like this? She couldn't think of such a method. That Li Mu is as cunning as a fox. He must have taught Her Majesty the wrong things. He thought for a moment and asked, should we remind the others? No need. Zhou Jing shook his head and said, if they can't even see through such a simple trick, they are useless. They should give up their positions as soon as possible and let someone capable take over. Li residence. Li Mu put the fish and tofu that the Empress liked to eat into the pot and asked with concern, how is Her Majesty's inner demon? Zhou Yi picked up a piece of tofu and blew on it gently. She took a small bite and said, it's all thanks to the chant you taught me. It's much better now. For some reason, ever since her inner demon first appeared, she would see Li Mu and it would throb uncontrollably. But after the morning court session, even without the chant, the inner demon didn't appear again. Perhaps it was because she imagined that Li Mu had been through hundreds of battles, which left such a shadow in her heart. But in reality, he was just like her, inexperienced. After realizing this fact, she felt much better. Li Mu was relieved when he heard this and picked up a piece of tofu for himself. According to the Empress's intentions, she would expose the director of the Ministry of Rights during today's morning court session, cripple his cultivation, and banish him. But Li Mu stopped her. Li Mu knew very well that the director of the Ministry of Rights and the mother behind him weren't the only ones who wanted his life. This time, he might as well take advantage of the situation and give them a collective surprise. So he proposed to join forces with the Empress and pretend that he had fallen out of favor. This would send a wrong signal to those who were ready to make a move. Finally, with the help of the case of the assistant director of the Ministry of Rights, they could catch them all in one fell swoop. After this incident, he believed that the remaining people would be much more obedient. The Empress agreed to Li Mu's plan without even thinking about it. The two of them had already put on the show and released the bait. Now, they were just waiting for the fish to take the bait. Crepe Myrtle Palace. Today's morning court session was held as scheduled. Since the end of the previous morning court session, many people in the court had been looking forward to today's session. The morning court session had just begun when another official stood up and said loudly, Your Majesty, I have a memorial. The minister-counselor of the Ministry of Revenue held up a memorial and said, I would like to impeach the constable of the Luoyang Yamen, Li Mu. During his patrol, he often hung around the music hall and neglected his duties, As soon as he finished speaking, the director of the Ministry of Rights also stood up and said, I would also like to impeach Li Mu. During his tenure, he accepted bribes from the people. The deputy director of the Taichung Temple also stood up and said, I would like to impeach Li Mu. As the imperial censor of the palace, he used his position to suppress dissidents and abused his power. I would also like to impeach Li Mu. I would like to impeach Li Mu. I would like to. After the minister-counselor of the Ministry of Revenue, the director of the Ministry of Rights, and the deputy director of the Zongjing Temple stood up, a few more officials stood up one after another. The target of their impeachment was also Li Mu. Without a doubt, this was a premeditated impeachment. These officials had already discussed this matter before going to court. Among these people, there were officials from the old party and also officials from the new party. Among them, officials from the Ministry of Rights made up the most. However, after these people stood up, they looked at each other and saw the confusion in each other's eyes. According to their guesses, there were countless people in the court who wished for Li Mu's death. However, at this moment, there were less than 10 people who stood up. This was far from the number they had expected. What were the other people in the court waiting for? Although the assistant director of the Ministry of Rights was also puzzled, there was indeed no one who stood up to impeach. According to the procedure, it was time for him to appear. He walked out with his ceremonial tablet and said, Your Majesty, the imperial censor was originally a clear stream in the court. The imperial censor of the palace, Li Mu, has many controversial actions and is no longer suitable to be the imperial censor. He did not impeach Li Mu. He just took the opportunity to raise a request that sounded reasonable. The imperial censor was an honest official. With so many officials impeaching Li Mu, it meant that he was no longer suitable to be the imperial censor. Moreover, the reasons for their impeachment were not groundless. In the past 3 days, he had put in a lot of effort to impeach Li Mu. If Li Mu was not the imperial censor, he was just a lowly constable in the divine capital. A lowly constable could be easily transferred out of the divine capital for any reason. By then, they would have the final say on how Li Mu would die. After the assistant director of the Ministry of Rights finished speaking, the court was very quiet. The important officials in front of him did not agree or disagree. Most of the other officials were also quiet. At this moment, the Empress's voice came from behind the curtains. You want to impeach Li Mu? The assistant director of the Ministry of Rights walked forward and said, Your Majesty, we want Li Mu. At this moment, nearly 10 officials behind him, including the assistant director of the Ministry of Rights, were stunned. Li Mu? Hadn't Li Mu fallen out of favor? Why was the Empress still addressing him so intimately? They dared to impeach Li Mu because Li Mu had fallen out of favor. If Li Mu had not fallen out of favor, then, they looked at each other, their hearts sinking into a bottomless abyss. Oh no, they had fallen into a trap. Chapter 299. The Empress's words of Minister Li caused the noisy court to fall into a temporary silence. Her Majesty rarely said the words, beloved minister. She only addressed the ministers in the imperial court as ministers. How could she address a minister who had fallen out of favor as beloved minister? The only possibility was that Li Mu's falling out of favor was just an illusion. Other than those who stood out to impeach Li Mu, most of the officials in the court showed a look of understanding. Today's scene was within their expectations. This was a trap set up by the Empress and Li Mu together. His Majesty and Li Mu teamed up to act as bait in order to lure these people out, and they really took the bait. At this moment, Zhang Chun cleared his throat and stood out. He said, Your Majesty, I have something to say. Mr. Mei looked at him and asked, What do you have to say, Lord Zhang? Zhang Chun pointed at the minister-counselor of the Ministry of Revenue and said, Lord Wei said that Constable Li spent time in the music hall during his patrol and neglected his duties. Then I would like to ask, in the case of Jianghu, who was not afraid of the academy's pressure. As a constable, Constable Li patrolling brothels, music halls, and restaurants is his duty. If it were not for the outlaws of Luoyang who often bullied the weak and humiliated the musicians, would Constable Li frequent these places? Wei Ting opened his mouth and was speechless. He knew that Zhang Chun was not entirely right, but at this moment, it was not important. The Empress, Minister Li, just now made him completely panic. As long as Li Mu did not fall out of favor, no matter what they did, it would be in vain. At this moment, Zhang Chun pointed at the Minister Counselor of the Ministry of Rights and said, "You said that Li Mu accepted bribes when he was on duty. As everyone knows, Constable Li is not afraid of power and wholeheartedly serves the people. He has brought justice for many innocent people in Luoyang. The people respect him and love him. When he was patrolling the streets, they understood his hard work and served him tea to quench his thirst and a bowl of noodles to allay his hunger. This is the people's kindness to him. You call this accepting bribes?" He snorted and looked around at the people in the court. He said, "If this is called accepting bribes, then I hope that all of my colleagues in the court today can make the people willingly accept bribes. Touch your conscience. Can you?" The Minister Counselor opened his mouth but could not refute. He knew what Zhang Chun said better than anyone else, but so what? His Majesty doted on Li Mu, so the people gave him these gifts to show their love and respect for him. Li Mu had lost the favor of the emperor, and the commoners had given him these gifts. He had accepted bribes. This was the court. They guessed that Li Mu had lost the emperor's favor. That was why they dared to stand up today and use this as a reason to impeach Li Mu. But judging from the situation in front of them, they seemed to have guessed wrong. One wrong step and the whole game was lost. In the end, Zhang Chun pointed at the senior minister of Taichung Temple and said, "You said that His Excellency Li took advantage of his position to attack dissidents. What is dissident and what is self? His Excellency Li has a noble character and has never formed cliques for personal gain. On the contrary, you all consider yourselves as the new and old cliques. The crime of disrespect in front of the palace was set by the late emperor. His Excellency Li respected the late emperor and carried out the law set by the late emperor, so he punished you. How dare you?" The minister Taichung Temple's face turned red. "You are slandering me." Many people in the court looked at Zhang Chun with disdain. There were indeed people in the court who respected the late emperor, but Li Mu was definitely not one of them. Li Mu's passion in the past few months was to overthrow the late emperor's old system. Who in the court did not know that? Zhang Chun, Li Mu's dog, was really shameless to protect his master. But no matter what, his words were watertight and no one could refute. Moreover, the situation in the court was not clear yet. No one was willing to stand up and refute. Whether Li Mu was guilty or not depended on whether the Empress was willing to protect him. If the Empress was willing to protect him, he would be innocent even if he was guilty. If the Empress was not willing to protect him, he would be guilty even if he was innocent. At this time, the Empress's voice came from behind the curtain again. A few days ago, Minister Li was maliciously framed. Did the Ministry of Justice find out who was behind it? Everyone in the court was shocked when they heard this. This happened in the last morning court. The Empress did not say anything about it last time. But today, she suddenly mentioned it. The meaning behind it was self-evident. The Assistant Minister of Rights' eyelids twitched. He could not help but lower his head. Zhou Zhong stood up and said, "Your Majesty, the culprit disguised himself as Lord Li and committed the crime. After that, he disappeared. The Ministry of Justice has not found any clues. If we wait for the Ministry of Justice to find clues, how long will Minister Li be wronged?" The Empress looked at him and said coldly, "Mei Wei, bring him here." Mr. Mei looked outside the hall and said, "Bring him here." Two women escorted a middle-aged man into the hall. When he saw the middle-aged man, the Assistant Minister of Rights finally could not control his expression. After the deed was done, he had ordered this person to leave Luoyang and never come back. He did not expect to see him in the court. Mr. Mei looked coldly at the middle-aged man and said, "Speak. Who ordered you to frame Lord Li?" When he said this, the officials were shocked again. They did not expect the Empress to have already captured the culprit. This person used fulu or pills to disguise himself as Li Mu. Even the Ministry of Justice would not be able to find him. The internal guards would not be able to find him. The Empress must have done it herself. The power of a transcendent powerhouse was beyond their imagination. Of course, more importantly, the Empress had done it herself for Li Mu. This was enough to prove one thing. The middle-aged man knelt on the ground and pointed at the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights. He said, "It was Lord Qin. It was Lord Qin who gave me the fake form pill and told me to pretend to be Lord Li and rape that woman to frame him." Nonsense. The assistant minister of Rights' face was pale. He pointed at him with a trembling finger and said, "I have no grudge against you. Why did you frame me?" The middle-aged man shook his head helplessly and said, "Lord Qin, it's useless. They all know." "Just admit it," the assistant minister of Rights said sternly. "What nonsense are you talking about? I don't even know you." Although his voice was not soft, everyone present could hear the trembling in his voice. Clearly, he was not confident. They all realized something. They did not expect the assistant minister of Rights to be the one who would frame Li Mu like this. When they thought about it more carefully, the assistant minister of Rights' wife was Zhou Chu's sister. Zhou Chu had died at Li Mu's hands. He had enough motive to frame Li Mu. The middle-aged man waved his hand and images appeared in front of everyone's eyes. In the image, the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights handed a pill to the middle-aged man and seemed to whisper a few words into his ear. If this middle-aged man was the adulterer who framed Li Mu, then it went without saying who the real mastermind behind this was. Seeing these images, the assistant minister of Rights trembled and fell to the ground powerlessly. At this moment, no explanation would be of any use. With witnesses and evidence present, they could perform a soul search on him. At that time, no matter what secrets he had in his heart, he would not be able to hide them. In the end, this matter was still due to his negligence. His negligence was that he did not kill this person and completely destroy the evidence after the deed was done. His negligence was that he was too anxious and believed the dowager consort's words. He thought that Li Mu had fallen out of favor with his wife, which was why he dared to act so recklessly. Now that things had come to this, there was no use regretting it. He hung his head and sat on the ground, not saying a word. Clearly, he had accepted his fate. The assistant minister of Rights' actions had completely confirmed his crimes. He was even spared from unnecessary interrogation. At this moment, the Crepe Myrtle Palace was completely silent. Everyone's hearts were extremely heavy because the entire palace was enveloped by a powerful aura. This aura came from the curtain in front of them. Under this aura, even the 5th and 6th level courtiers felt as if Mount Tai was pressing down on them. It was obvious that Her Majesty was extremely angry. First, you secretly framed him. Then, you joined forces with the imperial court to impeach him. You said that Minister Li was suppressing his dissidents. Who exactly was the one doing so? Hiring a murderer to frame a colleague. The Assistant Minister of Rights will be removed from his position and sent to the border counties. The Ministry of Justice will investigate this case strictly. Do not leave out anyone who participated in this case. The Assistant Minister of Rights, the Minister Assistant Minister of Revenue, the Minister of Taichung Temple, and the others formed a clique for personal gain and attacked dissidents. They will be removed from their positions immediately and will never be employed again. All those related to this case will be severely punished. In the imperial court, the Empress was furious. She dismissed all the officials who had impeached Li Mu today. Ever since she ascended the throne, the courtiers had never seen her so angry. The Assistant Minister of Rights and the others were just ordinary impeachments. Even if the reason for the impeachment was wrong, the consequences would not be so severe. Impeachment was an impeachment based on hearsay. Afterward, there would naturally be internal guards or imperial censors to verify the truth. Every official in the imperial court had the power to impeach. However, they had chosen the wrong time. The Assistant Minister of Rights had hired a murderer to frame a colleague in the imperial court. This was something that the imperial court could not tolerate. There were disagreements and conflicts between courtiers. This was normal. However, there must be a bottom line in any conflict. The Assistant Minister of Rights' actions had crossed the bottom line of the imperial court and the bottom line of the law. The Assistant Minister of Rights, the Assistant Minister of Revenue, and the others happened to be implicated by him. What should have been a normal impeachment became a conspiracy. In the end, not only did they lose their official positions, but they also had to face prosecution. This was obviously a test by Her Majesty. While testing the courtiers, she also caught all the courtiers who were tempted to take action against Li Mu in one fell swoop. She was using this method to protect her favored courtiers. She was also using the fate of these people as a warning to others. After today, everyone would know that Li Mu was the Empress's man. If they tried to slander or frame him through clumsy means, they would eventually pay with their lives. Chapter 300. The Minister of Rights, the Minister of Revenue, the Minister of Taichung Temple, and the others stood in the main hall. The Empress's voice was still echoing in their ears. It was not easy for them to enter the 4 great academies. After leaving the academies, they had to wait for a long time before they could fill a vacancy. They had also worked hard in the bureaucracy for many years before they could reach their current positions. Decades of hard work had turned into bubbles in a single day. They should have known that Li Mu was as cunning as a fox. How could he suddenly fall out of favor? This was all a trap set by him. There were so many officials in the court, but only a few of them took the bait. After the morning assembly, the Minister of Rights was taken away by the Ministry of Justice. No one knew how many people were involved behind him. The other 9 officials were also demoted, especially the Ministry of Rights. Under the Minister of Rights, half of the important officials were gone. The imperial examination was imminent, and the court had to fill the vacancy in the Ministry of Rights. The imperial examination could not be delayed. As usual, this matter was nominated by the Hall of Secretaries. The position of Minister of Rights was very important. It needed an experienced official. However, there were not many rank 4 officials in the court. Every one of them held an important position. It was not possible to transfer officials of the same rank to the Ministry of Rights. If they were transferred back and forth, there would be a vacancy that could not be filled. It would cause chaos in the other departments. After thinking about it, Lu Yi came to the Ministry of Rights to seek the opinion of the Minister of Rights. The Minister of Rights was also worried about this matter. The imperial examination was imminent, and the Ministry of Rights did not have enough manpower. After this incident, more than half of the officials in the Ministry of Rights were gone. Even the Minister of Rights was dismissed. He urgently needed an assistant. He thought about it but could not think of a suitable candidate. In the end, he said, "Why don't we let Minister Lu take over? Although he has not been in the Ministry of Rights for long, he is familiar with the affairs of the ministry. He can take on this responsibility." Lu Yi had some impression of Minister Lu. He said, "Minister Lu has just been transferred and he is going to be the Minister of Rights. Isn't this promotion speed a bit too fast? If he had someone he could use, the Minister of Rights wouldn't be forced to do something beyond his ability." He shook his head and said, "Dr. Lu was transferred here on a regular basis. It can't be considered a promotion. His experience is not shallow. Although he is still somewhat lacking as an assistant minister, there is no other way at the moment. The imperial examinations are important. If it is delayed, none of us can bear the responsibility." According to Great Zhou's usual practice, the officials of the various ministries were rarely transferred outside. The position of assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights was usually taken over by a doctor. However, the doctor often had to work hard for 10 years or even longer before he could become an assistant minister. This Dr. Lu had just been transferred not long ago, but he had already made an exception and was promoted. This was very rare in the officialdom. But who asked the former assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights to seek his own death? Of all the people he could have touched, he just had to touch Li Mu. This move was not a big deal, and Li Mu did not suffer any losses. More than half of the Ministry of Rights was lost by him. If the vacancy in the Ministry of Rights was not resolved as soon as possible, the imperial examinations would definitely be affected. After thinking for a long time, Louis nodded and said, "Since the minister recommends Dr. Lu, the Secretariat will nominate him, Ministry of Justice. Inside the prison of the Ministry of Justice, the Assistant Minister of Rights, who had been in high spirits during the morning court session, was now a prisoner. He sat dejectedly in a corner with a lonely expression. Zhou Zhong walked to the door of the prison and said, "Open the door." The jailer hurriedly opened the door, and Zhou Zhong slowly walked in. He walked in front of the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights and said, "His Majesty has ordered that the people involved in this case be severely punished. Lord Qin and that Li Mu have no enmity. Who is behind this?" The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights said, "Zhou Zhong is my wife's younger brother. He died because of Li Mu. I just want to avenge him. There is no one behind this." Zhou Zhong shook his head and said, "You are the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights. You have a high position. After the imperial examinations were reformed, you have even more power. Zhou Zhong is your wife's younger brother, not your biological brother. You have no reason to do this." The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights said, "I am responsible for what I did. Don't waste your breath." Zhou Zhong smiled and said, "Actually, even if you don't say it, I know. On the day Li Mu was imprisoned, your wife and mother-in-law came to the Ministry of Justice. If there is anyone in Shindu who hates Li Mu the most, it would be your mother-in-law. Her son died at the hands of Li Mu. It is reasonable that she wants to kill Li Mu for revenge." The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights looked at him and said, "Lord Zhou, you should know better than me that some things require evidence." Zhou Zhong shook his head and said, "I know what you are waiting for. You are waiting for the Zhou family to protect you. However, have you ever thought about why no one from the new party stood up for you in the imperial court today?" The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights' expression froze. This was something he could not understand even now. Zhou Zhong continued, "They already knew that this was Her Majesty and Li Mu's scheme, but they did not tell you. It is obvious that they have given up on you. You hired assassins to frame your colleagues and touched Her Majesty's bottom line. The Zhou family cannot protect you, and they have no way to do so. Regardless of whether you give them up or not, you will be sent to the battlefield at the border. With your cultivation, you will become a dead soul at the hands of those demon kings and ghost kings in less than a month. No, they will devour your body and soul. They will not give you the chance to become a dead soul." The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights thought carefully and his face gradually paled. Zhou Zhong looked at him and said, "When the late emperor was still alive, Her Majesty was already chosen as the crown prince's wife. At that time, the Zhou family's goal of stealing the country had not been exposed. The late emperor treated the Zhou family very well and gave them 2 death exemption tokens. Now that you have been sentenced to exile, it is no different from a death sentence. If the Zhou family is willing to save you, although they cannot restore your position, they can let you stay in the divine capital and keep your life. If the Zhou family is not willing to save you, then you can only wait for death." Zhou Zhong looked at him one last time and turned to leave. 15 minutes later, a woman came to visit him in the prison. When the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights saw the woman, he immediately got up and ran to the door of the prison. He shouted, "Wife, wife, save me." The woman's expression was ugly. She asked, "How did this get exposed?" The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights said, "It must be Her Majesty's divination. Li Mu's fall from grace was fake. We were all fooled by them." The woman gritted her teeth and said, "We are her family. She actually treated us like this for an outsider." The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights quickly said, "It's too late to say this now. Wife, you have to think of a way to save me. I heard that the Zhou family has 2 death exemption tokens. As long as I have one, I won't be exiled to the border counties." The woman nodded and said, "I will go and beg father. Wait for me here." Zhou Manor. Zhou Ting had just finished his seclusion. When he heard about the recent events, he was furious. "Stupid." The woman who had returned to the Zhou family said with a cold face, "Stupid or smart, I have to avenge Chu. He is a piece of flesh that fell from my body. I will not let him die in vain." Zhou Ting said with a sullen face. Because of your stupidity, we lost an assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights. Do you know how important that position is? The woman said coldly, I don't know and I don't want to know. I only know that I have to avenge Chu. Zhou Qian looked at her father and said, Father, you have to save my husband. If he is exiled to the border counties, what will happen to me? What will happen to our child? Zhou Ting said indifferently, this matter is already known by the entire court. His Majesty has personally issued a decree. How can I save him? Zhou Qian said, doesn't our family have a death exemption token? As long as we use the death exemption token, we can exempt him from the crime of being exiled, right? Zhou Ting glanced at her and asked, who told you that? Zhou Qian did not answer directly. She said, Father, I beg you. Save my husband. Zhou Ting was expressionless. The Zhou family did have a death exemption token, and there were 2 of them. They were both bestowed by the previous emperor. The Zhou family had seized the emperor's aura and destroyed the continuation of the Shao royal family. If they were to use their death exemption token, it would probably enrage the old faction of the Shao royal family. Moreover, the minister of the Ministry of Rights was already a useless person. There was no need to waste a token to save him. Even if he agreed, his eldest brother and the rest would not. Zhou Ting said, the Zhou family does not have a death exemption token. We cannot save him. Zhou Qian complained tearfully, Father, are you so heartless? Are you going to watch your daughter lose her husband and your grandson lose his father? Zhou Ting thought for a moment. He looked at her and said, there are many talents in the fairy's capital. After separating from him, I will choose another young talent for you. No matter what, he will be several times stronger than him. Zhou Qian looked at her father. Her crying gradually stopped. An hour later, in the prison of the Ministry of Justice, Zhou Qian stood outside the cell and said to the Minister of the Ministry of Rights, I have asked. The Zhou family does not have a death exemption token. Father cannot save you. Don't worry. After you go to the border counties, I will take good care of the child. Do not involve more people in this matter. Zhou Qian did not stay for long. She left in a hurry. The minister of the Ministry of Rights leaned against the cell door and slid down weakly. After an unknown period of time, a sigh came from behind him. He turned his head and looked at Zhou Zhong, who was standing in the shadows. He asked, what are you sighing about? Zhou Zhong looked at him and said slowly, I feel bad for you. You are doing well as the minister of the Ministry of Rights. You have no enmity with Li Mu. But because of someone else, you got into trouble. Your efforts in the first half of your life have been wasted. You do not have long to live. And the person who caused you to fall to this state is not even willing to save you. I believe you know very well that the Zhou family has a death exemption token. It is just that they are not willing to save you. The minister of the Ministry of Rights looked at him with a cold smile and said, don't you want me to give up more people? I am afraid you will be disappointed. This matter was done by me alone. It has nothing to do with anyone else. Zhou Zhong looked at him and said with a faint smile, have you ever thought about what you will be like after you die? He looked at the minister of the Ministry of Rights. His eyes were like deep pools. His voice carried a strange power as he slowly said, your wife, although no longer young, is still in the prime of her life. After you die, she will still have a long life. She will definitely remarry. At that time, she will take in an even younger and more handsome husband than you. In the future, they will have their own children. That person will live in your mansion, sleep with your woman, and if he is not happy, he might even beat up your children. Zhou Zhong looked into his eyes. His gaze was deep as he said slowly, they treated you like this. Is it worth it for you to protect them like this? Zhou Zhong's voice seemed to have a magical power. When the minister of the Ministry of Rights heard this, a trace of confusion appeared on his face. Then his chest began to rise and fall slightly. His breathing became rapid, the veins on his forehead bulged, and his eyes became bloodshot. I didn't want to interfere, but that old woman forced me to do so. That false form elixir was given to me by her, but she didn't save me. What right does she have to not save me? Since she doesn't want me to live, then let her die with me. Translator's note, Lu_Kaixian translator, Kaixian editor, Valvrave 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 editor, Valvrave. Chapter 301. Ministry of Justice. When Zhou Zhong walked out of the prison, the assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice, who was waiting outside, whispered into his ear, "Lord Chen from the Ministry of Personnel is here." The Ministry of Personnel and the Ministry of Justice were the pillars of the old party in the imperial court. Zhou Zhong walked into the yamen and saw a figure standing there. He asked, "Lord Chen, are you here for something important?" The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel turned around and looked at Zhou Zhong. He asked, "The higher-ups say that the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights must be punished severely. This is a big blow to the Zhou family and the new party. We can't let go of this opportunity." Zhou Zhong said calmly, "Just the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights is not enough." The assistant minister's eyes flashed. He asked, "Lord Zhou, you mean?" Zhou Zhong said, "The source of this matter is Zhou Ting's wife, not the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights. If we can drag her down, the Zhou family will protect her for the sake of their reputation or for other reasons. My goal is the Zhou family's 2 death exemption medallions. Without them, it will be much easier for us to fight the Zhou family in the future." The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel nodded. The late emperor's death exemption medallions were actually given to a thief who stole the country. It is indeed a disgrace to us. It would be best if we can make them use the medallions. However, I don't think the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights will rat out his mother-in-law. The Zhou family will not use the medallions for a mere assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights. Zhou Zhong looked at him and asked, "Does Lord Chen not believe me?" The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel was stunned. He asked, "Could it be?" Zhou Zhong said, "The assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights has already confessed that it was his mother-in-law, Zhou Ting's wife, who instigated him to frame Li Mu. She is the mastermind behind the scenes. This time, I will make the Zhou family pay the price." The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel was shocked. The assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights actually ratted her out. Then, he came to his senses and praised, "Lord Zhou is always full of surprises. If we can make the Zhou family hand over the 2 death exemption medallions, Lord Zhou will have done a great service." Zhou Zhong said calmly, "This is what I should do in order to support the legal wife." An uninvited guest arrived at the entrance of Zhou residence. The assistant minister of justice, Zhou Zhong, also had the surname Zhou, but he was different from the Zhou family. When he was in the imperial court, he sided with the old party. Over the years, the officials of the new party had suffered many losses in his hands. Zhou Zhong came to the Zhou clan alone. Even though there were no officials from the Ministry of Justice following him, the first Missy's husband was still in the Ministry of Justice's prison. Nothing good could come from Zhou Zhong's visit to the Zhou clan at this moment. Even so, the Zhou clan's gatekeeper did not dare to slight him. After inviting him into the Zhou clan's residence, he went to report it as quickly as possible. Zhou Zhong sat in the front hall, sipping his tea. After a while, someone stepped into the hall. Censor Zhou Xiong walked to the main seat and sat down. Only then did he look at Zhou Zhong and ask, "Assistant Minister Zhou, what business do you have with my Zhou residence?" Zhou Zhong put down his teacup and said, "I'm here on official business, so I won't beat around the bush." The assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights hired assassins to frame an important official of the court. Before he could finish, he was interrupted by Zhou Xiong. "The assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights has committed a serious crime. The Ministry of Justice will punish him accordingly. The Zhou clan will abide by the law and will not interfere." Zhou Zhong nodded and said, "That's good. In that case, I'll have to trouble Censor Zhou to invite Madame Zhou out so that I can bring her back to the Ministry of Justice for interrogation." Zhou Xiong's expression changed when he heard this. He forced himself to calm down and glared at Zhou Zhong. He asked, "What does the case of the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights have to do with Madame Zhou? She's the wife of the court. How can you interrogate her just because you want to?" Zhou Zhong's expression was calm as he said slowly, "His Majesty has decreed that the Ministry of Justice will handle the case of Lord Li being framed. Anyone involved in the case, regardless of identity or status, will be punished severely. The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights has already confessed that Madame Zhou is the mastermind behind the case of Lord Li. If the Zhou clan does not hand her over, it will be considered as defying the decree." Is the Zhou clan going to defy the decree? The veins on Zhou Xiong's forehead throbbed. He quickly regained his composure and said, "Assistant Minister, please don't cross the line." Zhou Zhong said calmly, "If I didn't cross the line, the person who came to the Zhou residence today would be the constable of the Ministry of Justice." Zhou Zhong's words were very clear. As the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice, he did not have to arrest criminals personally. However, he had shown enough respect to the Zhou clan by coming here alone. If the Zhou clan still insisted on being stubborn, they would be asking for it. This also meant that the Ministry of Justice was determined to take Madame Zhou. There was no room for negotiation. Even though Zhou Xiong wanted to kill the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights, he had to admit that this matter had blown up. After he calmed down, he looked at Zhou Zhong and said, "Sir Zhou, please go back first. I'll personally go to the Ministry of Justice to deal with this matter in 2 hours." Zhou Zhong stood up and said, "I'll be waiting at the Ministry of Justice." A moment later, in a courtyard of the Zhou residence, a woman grabbed her messy hair and gritted her teeth as she yelled, "Bastard, bastard. I didn't agree to Qianxian marrying him back then, but you insisted. Do you see his face now?" Zhou Ting slapped her face and said angrily, "Shut up. If it wasn't for you, things wouldn't have turned out this way." The woman covered her face. After being stunned for a moment, she completely exploded. She grabbed Zhou Ting's neck and said crazily, "How dare you hit me? How dare you hit me?" Zhou Ting knocked her out with a slap and ordered the maids in the courtyard, "Take Madame back to her room to rest. Without my orders, don't let her out of her room." The 2 maids helped the woman back to her room. Zhou Xiong looked at Zhou Ting and asked, "Fourth brother, about this?" Zhou Ting closed his eyes and said, "Go and ask Big Brother. No matter what Big Brother decides, I'll agree." Zhou Xiong walked out of the courtyard and crushed a jade talisman. Soon, a figure suddenly appeared in the courtyard. It was the minister, Zhou Jing. Zhou Xiong walked forward and said, "Big Brother, the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights at the Ministry of Justice sold out sister-in-law. Earlier, Zhou Zhong came to the residence to ask for her. I told him to go back and wait. How should we deal with this matter?" Zhou Jing's eyelids drooped slightly. He said, "As expected, the old party won't let go of this opportunity." Zhou Xiong sighed and said, "We have to answer to the Ministry of Justice. We can't really hand sister-in-law over." Zhou Jing said, "I'm afraid they don't want her." Zhou Xiong was stunned for a moment. He quickly reacted and asked, "Big Brother, are you saying that their goal is the Zhou family's death exemption medallion?" Zhou Jing extended his hand. There was a flash of golden light and 2 medallions appeared. He handed the medallions to Zhou Xiong and said, "Send these 2 medallions to the Ministry of Justice." Zhou Xiong took the medallions and said doubtfully, "2?" Zhou Jing said, "Either send them 2 or none. Sister-in-law is a member of the Zhou family. Isn't Qian Er's husband one too?" The death exemption medallion was too important. Zhou Xiong was reluctant to part with it and did not understand. After Zhou Jing's reminder, he quickly understood the matter. They could either save both of them or not save both of them. The Zhou family only had these 2 choices. As for saving one and giving up the other, as one of the 9 families of the Great Zhou, the Zhou family would be ridiculed if they did such a thing. The Zhou family could not afford to lose face. To them, they could lose benefits but they could not afford to lose face. He kept the medallion and sighed. He left the Zhou family and headed to the Ministry of Justice. A moment later, at the Ministry of Justice's assistant minister's office, Zhou Xiong slammed a medallion on the table and asked Zhou Zhong, "The death exemption medallion is here. Can I take the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights away?" Zhou Zhong picked up the medallion and looked at it. He said, "The late emperor gave you the death exemption medallion. It can even exempt you from the death penalty. Men, take Lord Zhou to the prison and release the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights." Zhou Xiong turned to leave. Zhou Zhong said, "Wait." Zhou Xiong's eyelids twitched. He asked, "Is there anything else?" Zhou Zhong said, "The assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights can be exonerated. However, in this case, Madame Zhou is the mastermind. If the Zhou family does not send her to the Ministry of Justice by today, I will send someone to take her away." Smack. Zhou Xiong took out another death exemption medallion and slammed it on the table. He said, "Is this okay now?" Zhou Zhong nodded and said, "Please go ahead." Zhou Xiong snorted and turned to leave. Not long after, he walked out of the Ministry of Justice with the former assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights. He looked at him angrily and said, "Remember, the Zhou family wasted a death exemption medallion for you. Treat Qianxian better in the future. Don't be ungrateful." The assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights nodded. Zhou Xiong, who had already turned around, did not notice that there was no gratitude in his eyes. There was only hatred. This matter had nothing to do with him, but in the end, he was implicated and almost lost his life. First, the Zhou family gave up on him. Now, they made such a face. Who were they trying to impress? Ministry of Justice. In the assistant minister's office, Zhou Zhong flipped open a book on the table. He flipped to a certain page, picked up a pen, and gently crossed off the two Zhou family on the list. Then, he closed the book and said slowly, "There are 7 more." Li Mu walked on the streets. The people of Fairy's capital greeted him warmly. "Hello, Constable Li. Constable Li, you're still single. My daughter is also of age." "Constable Li, do you want to consider my daughter?" "Constable Li, I have 2 daughters. One is prettier than the other." "Constable Li, don't go." Li Mu could not resist the people's enthusiasm. He did not even bother to collect his telekinesis and fled. The case was cleared. It was very thorough. The people even knew the details of the case. Now, all the people of Fairy's capital knew that he was a virgin. Along the way, there were countless people who wanted to marry their daughters to Li Mu. Although Li Mu usually got along well with them, he did not have any thoughts about their daughters. It was all Zhou Zhong's fault. Because of this, he became famous in Fairy's capital again. Sooner or later, Li Mu would find him and settle the score. When he finally reached his house, he saw a few carriages parked at the entrance. Beside the carriages, Mr. Mei was instructing a few people to move the things inside. Li Mu walked over and asked, "What's all this for?" Lord Mei smiled and said, "This is His Majesty's reward to you. There are precious fabrics, rare flowers, and some rare items that were offered as tributes from various places. Later, His Majesty will have people rearrange the array formation in your residence." The carriages were parked in a row outside Li Mu's residence. If not for Mr. Mei's explanation, Li Mu would have thought that the Empress was moving into his house. He really didn't expect that Li Si would be right about this. Li Si said that the Empress would warm up to him again after a short period of coldness. Looking at the boxes of rewards, Li Mu even suspected that the Empress was trying to flirt with him. Li Mu did not know whether she had met her inner demons or not, but it was true that she was inexplicably cold and hot to him. Li Si had said that this was a routine between men and women. Only by being both hot and cold, and being neither friendly nor distant, could they arouse the other party's nervousness and sense of danger. Now that Li Mu thought about it, during that period of time when he had been ignored, he had indeed been worried about his gains and losses. He had not been able to eat or sleep well, and his mind had been filled with thoughts of the Empress. But thinking about it carefully, it was impossible for the Empress to know such a sophisticated trick. Her EQ was not much better than Xiaobai's. How could she come up with such a sophisticated trick? He shook his head, threw this bold and unrealistic thought out of his mind, and walked into the residence. The Empress had rewarded many things. Li Mu planned to pick some and send them to Zhang Chun. Old Zhang's protection of him in the imperial court was no less than Li Mu's protection of the Empress. Li Mu was very touched by this. He specially asked the Empress to reward Zhang Chun with a 3-sectioned residence. It was located in the North Court, not far from the Li residence. Although they were not neighbors, it was just a matter of walking a few steps. At this time, in a residence not far from the Li residence in the North Court, Zhang Chun stood at the door and ordered 2 palace guards. He said, "Move slowly, move slowly. Don't break the things." Today, he finally fulfilled his wish of moving to a new residence. Although the residence was only changed from a 2-sectioned one to a 3-sectioned one, the location was worlds apart. This was the North Court, where the real high-ranking officials and dignitaries lived. If he lived here, he would not be embarrassed to say that he was an official in the imperial court. Zhang Chun pulled Madame Zhang around the new residence and asked, "How is it?" Madame Zhang said, "It's big enough, but the furniture is a bit old. Why don't we order some new ones?" Zhang Chun shook his head and said, "There's no need to waste money. It won't be too late to change after a few days when we get a bigger residence." Madame Zhang was shocked. She said, "This is already big enough. You want a bigger one?" Zhang Chun nodded firmly and said, 3-sectioned is nothing. At this rate, it's not impossible for us to get a 5-sectioned one. You can just wait to enjoy your life. Tidy up the room first. When you're done, I'll take you to Lord Li's residence for a walk." Madame Zhang sighed and said, "I knew that Constable Li had a bright future. I asked you to set him up with Yi, but you were unwilling. Now, there are so many girls in the Immortals' capital who want to marry him." "Shoo," Zhang Chun covered her mouth and said, "Didn't I tell you not to mention this in the future? You must remember this. Otherwise, there won't even be a 2-sectioned or 3-sectioned residence, let alone a 5-sectioned one. You don't want us to bring our daughter back to the small courtyard of the Yamen, do you?" Chapter 302. The case of the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights being instigated by his mother-in-law to frame his colleague had attracted widespread attention, both among the people and in the imperial court. Everyone's attention was on the Ministry of Justice as they paid close attention to the progress of this matter. Using despicable means to frame a colleague had crossed the bottom line of the imperial court. According to the law, both the Zhou family's wife and the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights would be severely punished. However, in the end, the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights was only demoted from his position, while the 4th wife of the Zhou family only lost her status as a madam. This was because the Zhou family had taken out the 2 death exemption tokens bestowed by the late emperor. Although it was a bit wasteful to use death exemption tokens to absolve the crime, they had no choice but to do so. According to the law, as the mastermind, the 4th wife of the Zhou family would not only be stripped of her status as a madam, but she would also be demoted to a lowly status. If the Ministry of Justice was more ruthless, it would not be impossible for her to be classified as an official prostitute. The Zhou family was now considered a royal family. If the Zhou family's wife became an official prostitute, the Zhou family's face would be trampled on. The Zhou family would also become the laughing stock of the entire divine capital. The Zhou family had used the death exemption tokens to absolve the 2 of their crimes. However, the old party, especially the Shao royal family, did not feel good about it. The Zhou family had seized the late emperor's empire, and now they had to use the death exemption tokens bestowed by the late emperor to absolve the Zhou family of their crimes. To the Shao family, this was more disgusting than swallowing 100 flies. Fortunately, these 2 tokens would not appear in the future. Sooner or later, they would be disgusted. It was better to be disgusted sooner rather than later. A grand banquet was being held in a luxurious mansion in the southern court. At the banquet, everyone from the old party gathered. Apart from the officials of the imperial court, there were also many members of the Shao royal family. The table was filled with delicacies. Everyone toasted and laughed. The Ministry of Justice's Zhou Zhong was undoubtedly the main character of this banquet. His position in the old party was extremely high. This time, he had made the Zhou family suffer such a huge loss and made a great contribution to the old party. The Zhou family scoundrels tried their best to curry favor with the late emperor when he was still alive and obtained 2 death exemption tokens from the late emperor. Every time I think of this in the past few years, it feels like a fishbone is stuck in my throat. Now that I've finally spat out this fishbone, it feels great. This is simply satisfying. The Zhou family's 2 death exemption tokens are gone. We have one less worry. Lord Zhou, let me toast to you. Lord Zhou, let me toast to you. Zhou Zhong was the main character of today's banquet. Even the original members of the royal family of the Shao clan gave him enough respect. This also made the other officials present envious. Zhou Zhong held a high position, had the ability and the means, and was also highly regarded by the Shao clan. After today, he would probably come into contact with even more secrets of the royal family. His future was limitless, and definitely would not be limited to the position of Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice. Once the Shao clan regained power, his position in the court would be even higher than it was now. Imperial Palace, in front of Tranquil Palace. A palace maid on duty was on duty. A few figures came from afar and stopped beside her. She looked up and immediately bowed. Greetings, Commander Mei. Mr. Mei glanced at her and said, take her away. Slap her 100 times and flog her 20 times. Send her to Fusho Palace. The palace maid seemed to realize something. Her face paled and her body trembled uncontrollably. Mr. Mei asked calmly, do you know why I punished you? The palace maid knelt on the ground and said in a trembling voice, Commander Mei, I know I was wrong. I know I was wrong. Mr. Mei glanced at her one last time and said, as a servant in the palace, you have to abide by the palace rules. Don't listen to what you shouldn't hear, and don't say what you shouldn't say. Take her away and flog her outside Fusho Palace. Fusho Palace. Fusho Palace was located in the West Palace. It was originally the residence of the imperial concubines. The current empress didn't have any imperial concubines, and she didn't drive the former emperor's imperial concubines out of the West Palace. Fusho Palace was the residence of the old Empress Dowager. In the West Palace, the Empress Dowager was the leader, followed by the old Empress Dowager. Since the death of the former emperor, the old Empress Dowager had basically been in a state of seclusion. The West Palace was usually very quiet. Today, the silence of the West Palace was broken by a series of screams. A palace maid was escorted to the entrance of Fusho Palace by 2 internal guards. First, she was slapped 100 times. Then, she was pressed to the ground and flogged 20 times. Her miserable screams could be heard clearly in the West Palace. The West Palace was a quiet place. The internal guards didn't have the guts to do this. It must be the Empress order. The palace maid was not tortured in the Empress Dowager's everlasting palace, nor in front of the other old Empress Dowager's palaces. It couldn't be a coincidence that she chose the old Empress Dowager's Fusho Palace. It must be that the old Empress Dowager did something that displeased the Empress Dowager and touched the Empress Dowager's reverse scale. That was why she changed her respect for the old Empress Dowager and didn't give the old Empress Dowager any face. This was an obvious warning. In Fusho Palace, an old palace maid was angry. She said loudly, there are so many places in the palace, but she chose to do it in front of our palace. Isn't this a show for the old Empress Dowager to see? The old Empress Dowager sighed and said, yes, this is her warning to me. I didn't expect her to be so protective of that person. I was negligent. Not long after, a palace maid came in and said, Old Empress Dowager, that palace maid fainted. Should we send her out of the West Palace? The old Empress Dowager shook her head and said, no matter what, she is still one of my people. Bring her into the palace and let her work in Fusho Palace. Then she looked at the old palace maid and asked, how is Yunyang? The old palace maid sighed and said, the prince consort's accident was a big blow to the princess. She locked herself in the princess residence all day and didn't see anyone. The imperial concubine said, no one would have thought that the one surnamed Shui was actually a spy from the devil sect. Go to the princess mansion and say that it was Aijia's order to let her come to Fusho Palace and stay with Aijia for a few days, Princess Yunyang's residence. After Cui Ming's identity as a spy was exposed and he escaped from Luoyang, Princess Yunyang locked herself in the residence. She didn't see anyone except for her personal maid who brought her food every day. At this time, in Princess Yunyang's room, she looked at a woman who suddenly appeared and asked in shock, "Who are you?" The woman smiled at her and said, "It doesn't matter who I am. What matters is that I am here to help you." Princess Yunyang said warily, "Leave quickly or I will shout for help." The woman shook her head and said, "Go ahead. I have sealed this place with an array. Even if you shout until your throat breaks, no one will hear you." Princess Yunyang said with a pale face, "What do you want?" The woman looked at her and said slowly, "Didn't I say that I am here to help you? Do you want to see the prince consort again? Do you want to sit on the highest position?" The woman's voice was bewitching. Princess Yunyang asked blankly, "What is the highest position?" The woman said, "Of course it is the supreme position. The position of the emperor." Princess Yunyang was shocked and said, "How is that possible?" The woman smiled and said, "If other women can sit there, why can't you? Don't forget that you have the blood of the Shao royal family and are the daughter of the late emperor. You are more suitable to sit on that position than her." In the room, Princess Yunyang pondered over her words and the wariness on her face gradually disappeared. Li residence. Li Mu already knew that the Zhou clan had used 2 death exemption gold medallions to save the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights and Zhou Chu's mother. Two children playing in the courtyard threw away their toys and ran over quickly. They opened their arms and said happily, "Daddy is back." Lu Qing picked up the 2 children, a boy and a girl, and played with them for a while. Then he put them down and said, "You two play by yourselves. Daddy is busy with official business." Because of the imperial examination, the officials of the Ministry of Rights were busy. Even after he went to the yamen, he still had many things to do. He walked into the study and habitually glanced at a bronze mirror on the table. His eyes narrowed slightly. A strange rune appeared on the bronze mirror. Lu Qing set up a soundproof formation and picked up the bronze mirror. After activating it with his spiritual power, a man's face appeared on the bronze mirror. Lu Qing's face darkened. He said, "You finally contacted me. How long do I have to stay in the Shendu?" The man said, 3 years. Lu Qing's face was filled with anger. He said sternly, 3 years again. That's what you said 3 years ago. 3 years ago, 3 years ago, you still said the same thing. I've been in the Shendu for 10 years. In order to not arouse suspicion, I bought a house, married a wife, and even had 2 children. I went from an 8th rank official to an assistant director of the Ministry of Rights. Now you're telling me 3 years again. How many years has it been?" The man frowned. "Watch your attitude. Don't forget who helped you avenge your parents." Lu Qing snorted coldly. "If it weren't for this matter, do you think I would listen to your nonsense here? Tell me, you haven't contacted me much in the past 10 years. What do you want me to do this time?" The man said, "I didn't contact you for your safety. Now, there's something important that I need your help with. The imperial examination is coming soon. I've arranged for some of our people to participate in the examination. You have to help them pass the examination." "That's impossible." Lu Qing flatly rejected him. "I don't need to say more about the importance of the imperial examination to the imperial court. This is the first year that the imperial court is free from the 4 academies. There must be countless eyes watching. The Ministry of Personnel, the Imperial Ancestral Temple, and the Internal Guards. No matter who has the ability, they can't do anything to the imperial examination." The man said lightly, "As far as I know, the imperial examination is organized by the Ministry of Rights. You are the assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights. Isn't it easy to help a few people? Lu Qing shook his head. The risk is too great. I can't do it. Who knew that Shui Ming was also your spy and accidentally exposed himself? Now the imperial court is investigating spies very closely. People like me are the main suspects. Every day, I go to the imperial court in fear. Do you know how much pressure I'm under? The man's voice was unquestionable. This is an order. When Sister Lu and Sister Wanwan come back, we can make dumplings together. Li Mu could understand the Empress's feelings. To a certain extent, they were the same kind of people. They both had a home that they could not return to. The Empress's home was still there. However, to her, that home was not a home. Li Mu really could not return to his own home. Sensing Li Mu's sudden depression, Zhou looked at him in confusion and asked, "What's wrong?" Li Mu shook his head and said with a smile, "It's nothing." His sadness only lasted for a moment. If he were given two choices, to return to the world he was familiar with or to stay here, Li Mu would choose the latter without hesitation. In the other world, he had no more worries. In this world, not only could he realize his childhood dreams, but there were also many people he cared about. During this period, the Empress had been coming to Luo Yunyang more often. She also stayed longer and longer. In the morning court, she was the lofty and majestic Empress. After the morning court session, she was the big sister next door, Zhou Qiong. She cooked together with Xiao Bai, went shopping together, and trimmed the garden together. Perhaps even the courtiers would not dare to believe that the person they saw on the streets was Her Majesty the Empress. As the day of the imperial examinations approached, the atmosphere in Chengdu gradually became tense. Students from all over the country gathered there. They were about to take part in an examination that could change their fates for the rest of their lives. Everyone cherished this opportunity very much. This was especially true for those who did not come from noble families or noble families. This was their only chance to change their fate and bring benefits to their juniors. This was an opportunity given to them by the Empress. In a certain inn in Chengdu, Li Mu was training Li Si before the examination. Although he was suspected of being a judge when he took part in the examination, if he did not take part, he could only be a constable and an imperial censor. There were also many restrictions when he worked for the Empress in the imperial court. During this period, many inns in Chengdu had earned a lot because the imperial examinations were approaching. Even though they had raised the price several times, the rooms still could not meet the demand. In a certain room on the second floor of a remote inn far away from the imperial city, 4 figures were gathered around a table, staring at a bronze mirror on the table. One of them used blood to write a complicated rune on the bronze mirror. Then, he used his magic power to activate it. The bronze mirror flashed, but there was no change. That person had a puzzled look on his face. That's impossible. That lord clearly said that when we reach Chengdu and activate this magic artifact, he will immediately contact us. In the past 3 days, we have tried many times. Why hasn't he responded even once? The Ministry of Justice's examination is only for those with bad intentions. Since he received the examination, he has the qualifications to participate in the imperial examination. The Ministry of Justice has no right to take away his right to participate. Since the assistant minister had already spoken, the official from the Ministry of Justice did not dare to say more. He obediently returned the examination to Wei Peng. Wei Peng took the examination and bowed to Zhou Zhong. "Thank you, Lord Lu." Zhou Zhong indifferently glanced at him and said, "I am acting according to the law." After discussing with each other, they all agreed to Lu Qing's suggestion. It was just a little more effort. If it could eliminate some of the risks that might erupt in the future, it was worth it. Lu Qing pointed at an examinee who had walked out of the office and said, "You, come over here." The examinee, Zhou Zheng, walked over nervously and asked, "Sir, do you have any orders?" Lu Qing asked, "What's your name?" The examinee said, "My name is Xian Hao." Lu Qing looked at Zhou Zheng and the others and said, "This examinee's appearance is extremely outstanding. Why don't we start with him? I've been injured in my cultivation recently and can't use too much mana. I'm afraid I'll have to trouble you all." Zhou Zheng walked out and said, "I'll do it." The examinee's face was filled with shock and worry. He didn't understand and said, Sir, what is this for?" Lu Qing patted him on the shoulder and said, "Don't worry. We're just going to perform a simple soul search on you. If there are no problems, we'll let you go." The examinee was confused and said, Why? We didn't say that today's examination needed a soul search. Why didn't the others use it?" Lu Qing comforted him and said, "Don't be afraid. Sir Zhou is just going to ask you a few simple questions. After you're done, you can leave." The young man called Xian Hao, although his expression was calm, the fear in his heart had already reached an extreme. That official didn't tell him that the Ministry of Justice's initial investigation required a soul capture. He only said that they had people in the court who would help them pass the imperial examination and avoid the subsequent investigations. Without any prior preparation, he couldn't guarantee that he wouldn't say something that he shouldn't say when his soul capture was carried out. Lu Qing saw his hesitation and asked, "What, is there a problem?" Xian Hao shook his head and said, No. If he did not resist, he might be able to get away with it. As long as he showed the slightest sign of resistance, he would probably immediately give himself away. In order to ensure that nothing went wrong, he had already obtained a secret dossier beforehand. Within the dossier, there was detailed information on most of the officials in the court. This Zhou Zheng, the Assistant Minister of Justice, had the strength of the Fifth Realm. In order to resist a soul search, he had deliberately trained his mind. With the strength of the Assistant Minister of Justice, it should be impossible for him to break through the defenses in his heart. Thinking of this, he was much more relieved. He walked up to Zhou Zheng of his own accord and said, "Sir, you may begin." Zhou Zheng nodded and said, "Look into my eyes." Xian Hao raised his head and looked into Zhou Zheng's eyes. He only felt that Zhou Zheng's eyes had suddenly become a whirlpool, as if trying to suck in all of his mind. However, his mind was extremely firm. Although there was confusion in his eyes, as if his soul had already been searched, in the depths of his heart, he had always maintained a clear mind. Xian Hao thought that Zhou Zheng would immediately ask him questions, but he quickly discovered that Zhou Zheng's soul search had not stopped. On the contrary, the whirlpool in Zhou Zheng's eyes spun faster and faster. It was so fast that the part of his mind he used to maintain his consciousness was uncontrollably sucked in by the whirlpool. In his shock, Xian Hao wanted to immediately look away. It was also at this moment that the whirlpool in Zhou Zheng's eyes spun at its peak speed, completely controlling his mind. After an unknown amount of time, Xian Hao finally felt his consciousness return. He saw Zhou Zheng looking at him expressionlessly. The officials standing around him all had shocked expressions. Xian Hao had already realized what had happened. Without hesitation, he activated a magic treasure he had hidden in his sleeve. His body disappeared from where he stood. The next time he appeared, he was already outside the Ministry of Justice. He placed a fulu on his body and turned into a ray of light, dashing into the distance. Trying to run? They are indeed spies from the demon sect. How dare they? A few auras shot into the sky from the Ministry of Justice and headed in the direction he had disappeared. The sudden change of events stunned the candidates who were still queuing up outside the Ministry of Justice. On the streets of the divine capital, Li Mu had just parted ways with Li Si. He was about to head home when he suddenly raised his head and looked behind him. A figure could be seen flying across the sky at a rapid speed. In the divine capital, unless there were special circumstances, flying was prohibited. There were a few figures chasing after the person. Li Mu sensed a familiar aura among the figures. After he reacted, he raised his hand and a golden ray of light flew out from his hand. Whoosh! After the sound of wind breaking, the figure that was flying in front suddenly stopped. His body was tied up by a golden rope, and the Fa Li in his body was quickly sealed. He fell from the sky and fainted. When Li Mu walked to his side, the other figures also descended from the sky. He looked at Zhou Zhong and asked, "What's going on?" Zhou Zhong glanced at the person on the ground and said, "This person is a spy from the demon sect. After I used the soul assimilation technique on him, he tried to escape." "Thank you for your help, Lord Li," Li Mu said. "It was just a matter of convenience. You could have caught him even if I didn't do anything." Then, he asked in surprise, "How did you find out that he was a spy from the demon sect?" Zhou Zhong said, "This person is handsome and attracted Lord Lu's suspicion. After I used the soul assimilation technique on him, I found out that he was a spy from the demon sect." The assistant minister of personnel looked at Lu Qing and said, "Lord Lu's eyes are as sharp as torches. You saw through his identity with a single glance." Lu Qing waved his hand and said, "I don't have such ability. I just happen to be lucky." The deputy minister sighed and said, "Lord Lu's luck is really good these days." He had just been transferred to the Ministry of Rights when the assistant minister of rights was in trouble. Coincidentally, the Ministry of Rights was short of people for the imperial examination, so he was promoted to assistant minister. The first person he met with was a spy from the demon sect. His luck was really unparalleled. In this short period of time, Zhou Zhong had already completed the soul assimilation technique on this person. He said in a low voice, "He still has 3 accomplices in the inn. Lords, follow me and take down these demon sect spies." On the first day of the Ministry of Justice's investigation, they found out that there were spies from the demon sect who tried to sneak into the imperial examination. If they were lucky enough to pass the imperial examination and avoid the investigation, they would bring a lot of trouble to the imperial court. In addition, through the soul assimilation technique on these 4 people, they found out that there were still spies from the demon sect in the Great Zhou court. This news caused quite a stir in the imperial court. However, the 4 people didn't know the identity of the spy. The imperial court could only wait for this person to reveal himself. Only then would they find out. Cui Ming had been a spy for more than 10 years before he was accidentally discovered. No one knew who the next Cui Ming would be. The newly promoted Assistant Minister of Rights had undoubtedly contributed the most in this incident. If it weren't for his suggestion, these 4 demon sect spies wouldn't have been discovered so early. There had always been rumors in the imperial court about Lu Qing's promotion to Assistant Minister of Rights. They believed that he had relied on luck to obtain his current position. If it weren't for the previous Assistant Minister of Rights accident and the Ministry of Rights confirmation, this position wouldn't have been his. This time, these people all shut their mouths. Luck was also a kind of strength. Why was it that he was always the one with good luck? This already explained everything. After this incident, although Lu Qing didn't receive any rewards, his wife received the status of a woman with a title. This meant that this newly appointed Assistant Minister of Rights and his family had truly stepped into the ranks of the nobility in the divine capital. Lu Manor. In the study, Lu Qing snapped his fingers, and a ball of flame appeared out of thin air. A bronze mirror on the table slowly flew up. After being enveloped by the flame, it quickly melted and turned into a pool of bronze liquid. Amidst the tense atmosphere in Chengdu, the first imperial examination in the history of Great Zhou arrived as scheduled. This was also the first time in history that the imperial court had bypassed the 4 academies and had the power to choose officials. The imperial examination system had taken the secretariat more than a month to come up with. The examinees had to complete the 4 subjects within 3 days. Out of the 4 subjects, the first 3 were liberal arts. They were mathematics, criminal law, and policy. The last subject was martial arts, which tested the examinee's cultivation. Among them, the first 3 subjects were the most important. The cultivation level of the martial arts was only used as a reference. Apart from the 36 prefectures, which required officials with profound cultivation, most of the positions in the imperial court did not have any requirements for the official's cultivation level or cultivation level. The questions for the mathematics subject were set by the Ministry of Revenue. The criminal law subject was set by the Ministry of Justice. As for policy, the questions were set by the head of the Secretariat and the 6 officials of the Secretariat. A month ago, the Ministry of Works had built the examination hall in Jianghu at the fastest speed possible. The examination hall could accommodate thousands of examinees. This morning, the first mathematics exam was held. In the examination hall, officials from various departments of the imperial court took turns to invigilate the exam. None of the invigilators' cultivation was lower than the 4th realm. There were many 5th and 6th realm heads of the Secretariat who personally guarded the examination hall. Under such circumstances, no one could cheat. In a certain room in the examination hall, Li Mu received the mathematics exam paper for the first subject. He had fought hard to make mathematics a compulsory subject and a separate subject. Back then, he had even quarreled with a few officials of the Secretariat because of this. Those officials of the Secretariat thought that mathematics was a side subject and should not have a separate subject. In the end, Li Mu persuaded them with reason and emotion, and they were finally convinced. This mathematics exam paper was as simple as it could get for Li Mu. The Minister of Revenue had set the questions according to his outline. Although the format and numbers had been changed, the essence was still the same. In terms of mathematics attainments, Li Mu could dominate the Great Zhou. There were a lot of questions in mathematics. Even Li Mu took almost an hour to finish the entire paper. Then, he put the paper into a paper bag and sealed it with a fulu. The Minister of Revenue personally set the questions for the first subject of mathematics. During the mathematics exam, he patrolled the examination hall. According to his estimation, out of the thousands of examinees, not many could finish all the questions in 4 hours. However, after only an hour, he saw someone leave the examination hall after handing in their papers. He recognized Li Mu and looked at his back as he left. He said disdainfully, "You're just relying on His Majesty's favor to jump up and down in the imperial court. When faced with a test of real ability, you have to show your true colors." Lu Yi was beside him and asked, "Minister, are you talking about Li Mu?" The Minister of Revenue said, "Who else could it be? My exam paper is difficult for an ordinary person to answer in 4 hours. He left in an hour. I'm afraid he didn't calculate much." Lu Yi shook his head and said, "Minister, do you know who came up with the mathematics exam paper?" The Minister of Revenue asked, "Isn't it your minister?" Lu Yi said, "It's Lord Li." The Minister of Revenue was stunned for a moment. He then asked, "You mean to say that the exam paper I received was written by him? He came up with the mathematics exam paper himself?" Louis nodded and said, "You can understand it that way." The Minister of Revenue frowned and said, "How can that be?" Louis said, "Minister, you don't have to doubt the fairness of the mathematics exam. Lord Li's attainments in mathematics are probably unmatched in the entire Great Zhou. Otherwise, the Secretariat wouldn't have let him write the mathematics exam paper. With Lord Li's ability, he doesn't need to prove himself in the imperial examination." During the month in the Secretariat, Lu Yi and the others had a deep understanding of Li Mu. Other people's impression of him might be that he was a hothead who cursed the heavens and the earth, but the 6 officials of the Secretariat of the Central Secretariat knew very well that Li Mu was not only proficient in mathematics and criminal law, but also often had unique opinions when it came to political affairs. He didn't need to use the imperial examination to prove his ability. This was because the imperial examination used his ability as a blueprint to select talents. The imperial examination lasted for 3 days. The first day tested mathematics in the morning, criminal law in the afternoon, policy on the second day, and cultivation on the last day. Mathematics was very simple for Li Mu. However, the criminal law exam was different. Criminal law was one of the 4 subjects of the imperial examination. It was extremely important. After receiving the exam paper, Li Mu knew that the person who came up with the questions was something. There wasn't a single question in the entire exam paper that tested the original text of the law of the Great Zhou. All of the questions on criminal law were based on case studies. Moreover, they weren't simple cases. The cases involved were often more complicated. Sometimes, there would be discussions on law and morality. Chapter 307. After careful consideration, Li Mu dismissed the idea of starting a pre-examination class. The imperial examination was a channel for the imperial court to select officials. It was a very serious matter. If he really did that, he would be looking down on the imperial court. If a cultivator wanted money, it was very simple. They could draw a few fulu and sell them to mortals. They would be able to obtain countless gold and silver items. The 3 examinations from 2 days ago had been completed. From now on, the fate of all the examinees in the imperial examination was decided. The results of the 3 examinations would determine whether or not they could pass the imperial examination. As for the combat examination, it would not affect the final results of the imperial examination. The combat examination was a separate subject. Those who performed well in the combat examination would receive more attention from the imperial court. They would have more opportunities to hold important positions in the imperial court in the future. For the last question, Li Mu did not hand in his paper early. Instead, he waited for Li Si to come out after the gong sounded. Seeing Li Si come out, Li Mu walked over and asked, "How was it?" Li Si said, "There are a few questions that I don't know how to answer, but it's not a big problem." After saying that, he looked at Li Mu strangely and asked, "You really didn't come up with the imperial examination questions?" Out of the 3 questions, he felt that the only difficult one was the criminal law. The laws that he memorized were almost useless. Fortunately, he had many years of experience as a constable in Jianghu County. Even if he had never solved a case, he had seen Lord Zhang solve a lot of cases. Moreover, the law was used to maintain social justice. There were many questions that did not need to follow the law. A normal person could make the correct judgment based on their intuition. As for the mathematics and policy questions, other than a few, he could easily answer most of the questions. It was not because he was proficient in these 2 questions, but because these questions were all in the key points that Li Mu had highlighted for him. He could not help but suspect that Li Mu was the one who came up with the imperial examination questions. Li Si was not a big problem, so Li Mu did not need to worry about him. For Li Si, it was enough as long as he did not fail the rankings. With his cultivation, he would at least be able to obtain an evaluation of B in the martial examination tomorrow. His future development would even be above that of his father-in-law. The combat examination wasn't a competition between examinees. Instead, the examiners would assess the students' abilities based on their performance. The results of the combat examination, from top to bottom, were divided into A, B, C, and D. Each grade was further divided into 3 subgrades. They had stayed in the academy for 2 years and had heard of Li Mu's name. Especially the Zhou brothers. Because of Zhou Chu's death, Li Mu and the Zhou family had an irreconcilable blood feud. However, this did not mean that they would take Li Mu seriously. Everything that he had done was merely because he had the support of the Empress. If it had been anyone else, the result would have been the same. However, today's combat examination had greatly shocked them. They had been trained as the Crown Prince. A qualified Crown Prince had to be able to rule the country and maintain order in martial arts. In terms of cultivation, they were confident that they could compete with any genius in the world, including the core disciples of the 4 sects and 6 schools. Only this Li Mu had shattered their confidence. Zhou Feng took a deep breath and said, "Martial arts cannot represent all one's strength. When cultivators fight, Fulu and magic weapons are the key to victory." Although this was somewhat self-comforting, it was also the truth. A low-level cultivator using a high-level Fulu to instantly kill a mid-level cultivator was not uncommon in the cultivation world. In most cases, when cultivators fought, it was still based on who had more Fulu, better pills, and stronger magic weapons. Other than on the battlefield, martial arts did not have much use. Such a person could be a good general, but no matter how powerful a general was, he was still just a subject. After being shocked, Zhou Feng breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, Li Mu's surname was Li and not Xiao. Otherwise, many people in the Zhou clan would not be able to sleep because of him. The Crown Prince of the South also breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, Li Mu was not a member of the Zhou clan. Otherwise, he would have become the greatest obstacle to the Xiao clan regaining the throne. On the drill ground, Li Mu and the assistant minister of the Ministry of War had been in a stalemate for 15 minutes. In the past quarter of an hour, Li Mu finally realized what a real powerhouse was. The assistant minister of the Ministry of War was extremely experienced in battle. After 100 moves, Li Mu still had not found a flaw. This kind of person's comprehension of martial arts had probably reached an extremely profound level. Across from Li Mu, the assistant minister of the Ministry of War's gaze grew more and more shocked. Li Mu had not found a flaw, and he had also not found a flaw in Li Mu's. His martial arts experience had been honed through countless life and death situations and thousands of battles. No matter how talented a young man was, it was impossible for him to achieve this. The only possibility was that he had completely inherited the martial arts attainments of a martial arts expert. In the martial examination, other than Fulu and magic treasures, Daoist techniques and Abhijna were all allowed. Li Mu clasped his fist and said, "Assistant Minister, please enlighten me." It had been a long time since he had experienced such a satisfying battle of the martial way. The assistant minister of the Ministry of War admired Li Mu. This psyche control technique was not a secret. His lips moved slightly as he whispered a few words to Li Mu. Psyche power cultivation was an unorthodox method. Li Mu knew how to use psyche power to speed up cultivation, but he had never heard of using psyche power to attack. Psyche control was actually a kind of magical power. After hearing the assistant minister's message, Li Mu formed a seal with both hands and channeled his mana. With himself as the center, he released his psyche power. Around the drill ground, the onlookers all felt a kind of pressure pressing against their faces. A few officials from the Ministry of War were fine. Their bodies only trembled a little before they stabilized themselves. Most of the examinees around them took several steps back. A few of the weaker ones even fainted. The examinees looked at Li Mu with shock and fear in their eyes. The assistant minister of the Ministry of War sent some spiritual energy to the unconscious examinees and woke them up. Then, he said to Li Mu, "This is your first time using psyche control. You can't control it yet. With more practice, you will be able to control it freely in a few months." Li Mu had already experienced this wonderful use of psyche power. He clasped his fist and said to the assistant minister of the Ministry of War, "Thank you, assistant minister." The assistant minister of the Ministry of War waved his hand and said to the crowd, "The martial arts examination has ended. You can all leave now." In 3 days, outside the examination hall, the results of the written examination will be announced. This time, the written examination took 2 days, but the combat examination only took half a day. Unlike the written examination, the results of the combat examination were announced on the same day. The first imperial examination of the imperial court was already the center of attention. After the combat examination ended, the news quickly spread throughout the fairy's capital. Before the combat examination, people had already guessed who would be the top scorer of the combat examination. The brothers Zhou Zheng and Zhou Feng were the sons of the Minister of War. They were also the most outstanding students of the Qingyun Academy. They were the sons of the South Prince. They were skilled in both civil and martial arts and were also outstanding talents of the younger generation. The Zhou family and the Shao royal family had poured too many resources into them. Since a few years ago, they had been groomed as the crown prince of the Great Zhou. The top scorer of both the civil and martial examinations would most likely be one of them. No one had expected that the top scorer of the martial examination would be Li Mu.